Kamen Entchev here with Tom Casselman. We are back for some more Salute Your Sports, baby. It's been, about a month by? We did our preseason preview for the NFL. We're 3 weeks in. We have a lot to talk about. Work's been busy, life's been busy, but the boys are back in town. The hot topics that are around the NFL is going to be contender versus pretender. We have certain teams that are off to a start that is way better than expected. Other teams like the Bengals, for example, are struggle busting. Can they make the playoffs? Are they toast? What about the Vikings and the Steelers 3-0 starts? What about the Saints and Bucks 2-1 each in that NFC South? Ravens also 1-2, Niners 1-2. We have a lot of talk about what team is going to fade and not make the playoffs, who's actually going to make the playoffs in the NFL. Plenty of big games this week as well. We're talking about some of the big matchups, giving some predictions. I know Packers, Vikings is very intriguing to me. Lions, Seahawks as well. Another one of those surprise 3-0 teams, the Seattle Seahawks. Plus college football on the docket. Alabama and Georgia. A little bit different feel this year. No Nick Saban. What's that going to do for the matchup? I can't wait to get started, Tom. How are you doing today on this beautiful Wednesday night, recording on a Wednesday night? A lot of football stuff, Saturday, Sunday, and even Thursday night football to talk about in betting locks of the week. How's it going, Mr. Casselman?
Everything is going fantastic, Kamen, and it's really great to be able to do a show as we are, by my calculator standpoint, 17.64705. I'm going to let the rest of those digits fall off. Percent of the way through the NFL season, so not quite at the quarter way mark, but approaching it. And I feel kind of like that first quarter or so is where we're going to have a good sense of where teams are. And of course, we've seen many seasons. There are plenty of teams that go through their ebbs and their flows. Of course, the Bengals, the team that we're going to be talking about, almost notorious for starting a season out 0-2. This year, 0-3, and the feel is a little bit different. But let's start out with, contenders versus maybe some fool's gold. Let's just say, I think a great place to start out is probably the most surprising team on this list, and that is the Minnesota Vikings, a team that heading into the season had no J.J. McCarthy as he has a torn meniscus out for the year. They brought in Sam Darnold, who has some draft pedigree, of course, a top 5 pick. I believe he was 3rd overall to the New York Jets when he was drafted in that Baker Mayfield class. Similar to Baker Mayfield, another quarterback we'll be talking about later, a little bit of a theme here. Bounced around a couple different locations, ends up with that 1-year, $10 million kind of prove-it deal in Minnesota. And just to jump off right off the bat with Minnesota, I think they're legitimate. I think that the Minnesota Vikings are a masterclass in what good coaching can do. Kevin O'Connell, of course, as the head coach and also the offensive play caller, has done a marvelous job. So we've seen what he did last season. Kirk Cousins goes down with an injury. First off, Kirk Cousins on the way to perhaps one of the best seasons of his career, if not the best season of his career, before he got injured. And then you have kind of a revolving door. Joshua Dobbs comes in, and Kevin O'Connell is literally coaching him in game, maximizing every second he has on the headset to get a passable performance, pardon the pun, out of a quarterback. We're not going to say Josh Dobbs is anybody, special as far as the elite of the elite NFL talents go, but certainly looked like a pretty representative quarterback at times. We've seen him also, Kevin O'Connell, work with Nick Mullins. And so this year, Sam Darnold, a guy that was kind of, he's bounced around the league a little bit maligned, saying, and I think it was like his rookie or second year, is like, oh, I'm seeing ghosts out there on the field, which is a great thing to hear from your starting quarterback for the New York Jets. But he's done a marvelous job coaching the Vikings to this point. Of course, I want to quickly bring in Brian Flores on the DC side of things, former head coach for the Miami Dolphins, somebody who is debating how you want to talk about it, perhaps a little bit blackballed based on how his exit from Miami went. Nobody really wanted to give him a chance. He was a linebackers coach for a little bit. Bringing him in as a DC, I think he's going to be in the next year or two back in kind of that carousel of head coaching candidates, simply because of the job he's doing with a team that doesn't have much individual talent on that side of the ball. So Vikings to this point 3-0 in what is shaping up to be a pretty tough division in the NFC North. So I think they absolutely are legitimate playoff contenders. I'm not willing to go to the next level with
Yeah,
them.
playoff
But
contender.
when you've got 3 wins in the bank already in a 17-game season, you can play 500 ball the rest of the way and still be firmly in the playoff hunt. So I think the Vikings are right in there.
Yeah, I think what's really impressive about the Vikings, Tom, is actually Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson have been out. They've been injured. Even Justin Jefferson has missed a little bit of time during some of these games with an
Mm-hmm.
injury. They're not even 100%. I mean, and we're talking about Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, arguably the second and third receiving targets for Minnesota. I mean, look, is Sam Darnold going to fade a little bit? I mean, probably. He's leading the NFL with 8 touchdown passes right now. I don't expect him to be the NFL leader in passing touchdowns, but I do expect this team to make the playoffs. Like you said, off to a 3-0 start. Their room for error is far greater than a 1-2 or even a 2-1 team. I think their defense has been wildly impressive. You talk about Brian Flores. I mean, there is some guys, Tom, that are better as a defensive or offensive coordinator.
Sure.
He may not have been head coaching material. It does not mean that he's not a terrific defensive coordinator, which he definitely is. So I think Minnesota definitely looks like the real deal right now. They've got a ton of weapons. Aaron Jones, by the way, upgrade at running back they got this season. He's looked really good. And I always think, Tom, when it comes to the great quarterbacks are going to be great quarterbacks no matter what. The bad quarterbacks will be bad no matter what. Vast majority of NFL quarterbacks are somewhere in the middle.
Situational, yeah.
Sam Darnold was a bad quarterback with the Jets, the Panthers. He was in a really bad situation. You look at Geno Smith with the Jets, he was also very bad. You look at Geno Smith with the Seahawks, he is at worst an average quarterback, if not
Mm-hmm.
above average. Really good talent, a really good situation can take an average quarterback, mediocre quarterback, make him look like a top 15 NFL starter, which at the current moment, Sam Darnold, no question is that. I mean, he's probably like the number 2 guy right now in the extremely, and I do mean extremely early MVP voting. But if I had to vote right now, 3 weeks in, Josh Allen MVP, Sam Darnold number 2 in
Mm-hmm.
my MVP ballot. He's looked really, really good. They're not just beating teams. I know some injuries, but they beat the 49ers, one of the top
Mm-hmm.
5 rosters in the NFL. And by the way, in that game, Kittle and Debo did play in that game. I know last week they didn't. Just to
Mm-hmm.
clarify, Kittle and Debo did play in that game for the 49ers. This last week, Texans are 2-0. I know not against great teams, but really talented Texans team comes in undefeated. They not only beat them, they beat them 34-7.
Smoked them.
This is the National Football League where the reigning back-to-back champions, Kansas City Chiefs, win on one play, the last play of the game in 3 straight weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Bills, Jaguars, another crazy game, a big blowout. But for the most part, Tom, you look at about 70 to 80% of these NFL games, they're going down to one possession. They're going down to the last few minutes. Not the Vikings games. Not the Vikings games. Not against the Houston Texans. Do I think they're the favorite to make the Super Bowl out of the NFC? No, I don't. I do think I'm not ready to go quite there as far as Super Bowl contender, but I'm looking at where they're at right now. I think the Lions will still eke out the division, but I think the Minnesota Vikings, to me, Tom, at the current moment, got to be a wild card team. I would
Mm-hmm.
be surprised if they're not a wild card team. Like I would say I'm about 65 to 70% sure they'll be in the playoffs, about 100% sure they're a legitimate contender where going into week 18, they will have a chance to be in the playoffs, the Minnesota Vikings. Also, this week, they play the Packers. We'll talk about that game later on. Don't want to give
Mm-hmm.
away too much. Jordan Love may or may not play. If he plays, is he rusty? Is he hurt? What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of, things are looking good for them. Things are setting up
Yeah.
well for Minnesota. They, for me, are, of all these teams we'll talk about down the list, they're the most realistic contender and the one team I put the best chance to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and especially just really quickly wrapping up on the Vikings when you look at how their schedule is set up. If we, preseason, we all look at the schedule and we falsely say, "Oh, this is a win, this is a loss," that sort of thing. Giants to start the season, I think everybody pretty clearly could say, "Yeah, Vikings expected to win." 49ers and Texans, I know that those were home games for the Vikings.
Else.
Those are two games that most people outside the great state of Minnesota probably thought were losses for the Vikings. So the fact that they emerged from that 3-0, they still have the rest of a pretty soft AFC South by the looks of it on their docket. Of course, with all their divisional games coming up, I completely agree with you. They are in a firm position to, if not win the division, be one of the top wild card seeds on the NFC side of the bracket. Another team on the NFC side in a division that I think we kind of sort of poo-pooed a little bit. We walked in, we said, of course, the 49ers, and they have their struggles. We'll get into that a little bit later on in the program. But the Seahawks starting out 3-0, this is one where I think that the Seahawks are, what's the positive side of victims? Benefactors of circumstance. I think this is a team that has a pretty soft schedule to start out the season. And that's, no fault of the Seahawks. You can't really control who you're playing or when you're playing them, but we're looking at a single possession win. When I say single possession, most games in the NFL, like you said, are going to be that way. So a 6-point win over a Denver Broncos team that I'm not particularly impressed with, nor am I particularly impressed.
That was week one with Bo Nix too.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was his rookie quarterback in his first start.
Best time to face a rookie quarterback is week one of the season. So you get a narrow win there. You get a narrow win against a Patriots team that is toothless, seemingly. When they go up against a team like the New York Jets, the Patriots started out the season with a couple of strong wins, or a couple strong close games. I know they beat the Bengals week one, lost to the Seahawks week two, and then talk about defanged. The Miami Dolphins at this point are a team that I didn't. Coming into the season at full strength, I didn't think we're necessarily a playoff team. So when you take away their starting quarterback, you have a really docile passing game. That's going to make it easier for a Seahawks team as well. So I think as much as we can laud the Vikings for starting out the season strong with the schedule that they had, also going to laud the Seattle Seahawks, but looking ahead for them, they still have all of their tough games. They have all of their divisional matchups. They have no NFC matchups so far. And as far as tiebreakers go, AFC games matter the least. So they still, of course, are going to face their entire division. They're still going to have the Bills. They're still going to have the Jets, the Packers, the Vikings that we just talked about. They have a pretty tough road to hoe if they want to be a playoff team. Granted, with 3 wins in the bank, can't take those 3 wins away from them. Like I said, all they have to do is play 500 ball the rest of the season, and they're most likely going to be in as a 10-7 team. So I would say that I'm a coin flip on them. I'm pretty firmly behind the Vikings making it to the playoffs. Seahawks, I'm a little more wishy-washy as far as they go. Hard to ignore the 3 wins that they already have being a pretty significant leg up just over other teams that don't have an undefeated record. But I'm leaning more towards coin toss or maybe they're fading toward the end, 9-8, losing on tiebreakers, not quite making it in at the end of the season.
Yeah, ironically, we're so much on the same page today. It's weird. Sometimes we're on the same page, but sometimes we're very different. I agree, Tom. Very soft schedule. They beat the Patriots by 3 points in overtime. They beat the Broncos in Bo Nix's first ever start. They beat Miami I like Tua. I'm a perfect example of how everyone says, Tua's in a great spot. It shows you that not everyone could be a really good quarterback, just because you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. It is a skill set. Tua is a legitimate quarterback. For me, when healthy, a top 10 quarterback in the league. With that said, I'm a little bit disappointed in the Dolphins, Tom, because we've seen Skylar Thompson a couple years ago, and he was really bad then. Knowing Tua's injury history, I'm not saying you need to get a starter to compete against them, but get yourself a really good backup. Like, for example, Gardner Minshew, who I know is starting with the Raiders, but that's a perfect example of a very, very serviceable backup. Even like Jacoby Brissett for the Patriots. I know he looks bad because everybody's bad, but like on a good team, Jacoby Brissett would look okay. The Dolphins, I mean, I know they have Tim Boyle now too, but that guy's terrible too. So Miami should have gotten themselves a better backup. But yeah, 100% Seattle has been beneficiary of an easy schedule, 2 home games and 3 without Tua,
Hmm.
mediocre to bad team, the Dolphins. I lean them on the outside looking in. I do think they can finish 10-7. I do think they can play 500 ball the
Mm,
rest of the way, but I
that puts
also
them in
think they're
for
going to
me.
lose. I think they're going to lose the tiebreaker. Like you said, 2 AFC wins. I'm looking at teams like the 49ers, teams like potentially the Rams and Cardinals, other teams in the division. It's a really good division. The Cardinals are better like we expected. The Rams are probably worse, not because they're bad, but because of all the injuries they've
Hmm.
had. Like, 3 offensive linemen, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. But man, as long as you have Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay, those 2 guys give you a chance to win every single game. Matthew Stafford, probably the most underrated quarterback behind Drew Brees and Steve Young, the 3rd most underrated quarterback in the history of the league. Gotta love Matthew Stafford. I lean Seattle on the outside looking in, but I think they finish above 500. They are a playoff contender, not a true team that's going to really make a deep run, though, in the playoffs if they find a way to get in. I say outside looking in for Seattle.
I know that the show is back when you call a Hall of Fame quarterback underrated.
I know how he's underrated. Where are the Pro Bowls, baby? Where are the Pro
He has a
Bowls?
gold jacket. You can't get more rated than that.
Who has a gold jacket? Which one?
Steve Young.
Yeah. And
Yeah, he's in the hall.
how often do you see Steve Young on the top 10 quarterback list of all time? I usually see him on the outside looking in.
Well, that's because there's a lot of really, really good
The
quarterbacks in the
most
NFL's
the
history. I mean,
most
that's tall
accurate
timber.
passer in the history of the league per era is probably Steve Young. When he retired, Tom, he was number 1 all time in passer rating. The stats, the rules, everything is jacked up
Hmm.
these days. But for an efficiency standpoint, which you know how much I love efficiency,
Sure.
touchdown to pick ratio, completion percentage, all the other statistics out there, Steve Young is as good as anybody all time. So he's a top 10 quarterback. He's better than John Elway, and he's better than Brett Favre. And most lists I see have Steve Young behind those guys.
He's a better person than Brett Favre, more importantly. The Steelers are another 3-0 team in the NFL, and they have had a little bit of an interesting path to getting here. I mean, going into the season, Russell Wilson was supposed to be their quarterback. He was the QB1. He had pole position, to quote Mike Tomlin, the head coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But then, toward the end of the preseason, a little bit dinged up, Justin Fields takes the field for the Steelers.
Mm.
And I mean, the Steelers have looked, I think, probably fairly similar to how they've looked in previous years, where they're not going
They
to wow you,
find a
they're not
way
going to
to win
knock
the
your
game.
socks off.
I had him
Exactly.
in the playoffs, Tom, before the season started. They were my playoff pick.
I think
Last
I
wild
had
card spot.
them. Did I have them on the outside looking in? I
You
probably had
did.
them on the outside
You
looking
had him
in.
last in the division. I said Browns are last.
No, no, no. I had the Browns last.
Did you? Okay.
Oh,
Well,
I
I
can
had.
promise you, I had Deshaun
Okay.
Watson, the
Well,
nasty man, and the Cleveland Browns in last place.
Pittsburgh's a playoff team, but go ahead. I had him
Yeah.
before the season started, too.
Well, so for Pittsburgh, it's kind of interesting because we said what we said about the Seattle Seahawks, and it's hard not to turn around and say something similar about the Pittsburgh
The
Steelers,
schedule.
where you've got the Falcons to start the season. Falcons might warm up a little bit to win the division. I think that they were my preseason pick. I don't have it pulled up in front of me right now, but that's a talented team that maybe needs a little bit of time to get going, especially with Kirk Cousins coming back off that knee injury, needs to get in a bit of a rhythm. But
Mhm.
again, on the road, not beating up, winning a low scoring affair against the Denver Broncos, and then of course against the LA Chargers, a team that was without one of their standard replacement level wide receivers in Josh Palmer. And overall, a Chargers team that I know they've started it out pretty strong, but again, it's a little bit of who have you played. So
I
I'm not
think the
overly impressed with that win.
Sorry to cut you
Okay.
off real quick.
Mhm.
I believe the game was tied when Herbert got hurt. So they technically
Mhm.
won against the backup late in that game. But go ahead.
Yeah, a little. Yeah, so like a little bit of good fortune. Like the Steelers, they play in a division. The AFC North always feels weird, and it's weird in part because the Ravens and the Bengals, like occasionally will just lose games that it feels like, why did you lose that game? But then they'll like we saw with the Ravens, they just mollywop the Dallas Cowboys. Although I guess that's not completely out of the norm because the Saints did the same thing. Another team we'll be talking about. I go back and forth because they play in the stronger conference, the Steelers
Mhm.
do. They play in a strong division, regardless of the fact the Bengals are an 0-3 team. I still think that they're a team that you kind of have to worry about a little bit. Like they're not going
Sure.
to be a team like looking at, say, the Carolina Panthers. Although they look pretty good this past weekend too. So I'm similar to the Seahawks as I am with the Steelers. I think that I'm a coin flip. I don't necessarily know they make it. I know they have the Colts this week, so decent chance they move to 4-0 to start the season. But then, we'll see what they do against the Cowboys. They've got the Jets. They've got all of their divisional games. I mean, closing out the season, going at Eagles, at Ravens, home against the Chiefs, home against the Bengals. That's going to be some tough slogging right there. I mean, good Lord. I'm looking at the Steelers schedule right now, like off tangent, like almost all of their divisional games are right at the end of the season. So I think that they can have a chance to be a good playoff, a playoff team. I know I sound like a broken record with this whole year 3-0. All you have to do is play 500 ball the rest of the way, and you're in. I think the Steelers are a lock to keep Mike Tomlin as a at least winning coach,
Nine and
or at
eight,
least
baby.
500 coach the rest of the way. So I think 9-8 is absolutely strongly within the range of outcomes. I'm on the fence at this point about whether or not they make it into the playoffs, but I say that only because the calculus is a little bit different with 17 games to 16 games because literally one more game. Um, I think some other teams might be able to put things together. I don't know where the Steelers necessarily go for answers. So it feels like they're winning games, but I don't know if their ceiling is much higher than what it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of exactly what I expected. I thought Russell Wilson
Hmm.
would be the starter, not Justin Fields, but we kind of have seen this with Pittsburgh last year with Kenny Pickett as the starter. They don't need a good starting quarterback to make the playoffs. They were in the playoffs last year. They're a well-coached team. They have the
Hmm.
second best player in the league, and TJ Watt behind only Patrick Mahomes. The guy is just an animal on defense.
Hmm.
They have a fantastic kicker. They have a good special teams. They can run the ball okay. They don't turn the ball over. One thing about Russell Wilson, he's never turned the ball over. Justin Fields, look at the last couple of years, has really cleaned up that portion of his game, at least the picks side of things. I know the fumbles this year have looked good. I know we had a
Hmm.
lot of fumbles last year, but as far as a interception scenario, not really a pick type guy. So I thought they would be the 7 seed in the AFC because some organizations, some franchises, Tom, find a way to win
Hmm.
games. That is what the Pittsburgh Steelers do. They find a way to win close games. That's always what they've done. It's in their DNA. I mean, I'm looking at the teams that, could be wild card contenders. Heck, they're still a division contender. I mean, they're
Oh,
3-0. The
absolutely. Yeah.
Ravens are 1-2. The Bengals are 0-3. The Browns are what, 1-2 as well. So they can actually go out and win the division. But if you look at like wild card teams, the Dolphins lost their quarterback. Look at the AFC South.
The
The
Jaguars
Colts and the
stink. Oh
Jaguars
my
are worse than
gosh.
we thought. Obviously, I look at the AFC West. Chargers, not great.
Yeah.
Raiders, not great. Broncos, not great. I mean, who's going to really make it? I look
Process
at
of
like
elimination.
probably the Bills, and then the Jets get a wild card.
Hmm.
And then we get, we have to get an AFC North team. They're going to be at least first or second. I mean, I don't think anyone in the South is getting a wild card. I don't think anyone in the West is getting a wild card. I look
No.
at the AFC East without two of the Dolphins aren't getting a wild card. So I would say
Yeah.
the Steelers are basically a shoe-in for a wild card spot, in my opinion. They already beat the Chargers, who, by the way, could potentially be a tiebreaker team
Hmm.
if they do get Herbert healthy, if they do play well. I don't see how they don't make the playoffs, in my opinion.
You're
And I don't really say that they're a great team, but they're a good team that finds ways to win close games. They're good enough to make the 7 seed, Pittsburgh Steelers.
yeah, you're speaking some real wisdom there. Because laying it out the way that you did, you've convinced.
Right?
I am also now in. The Steelers are absolutely a
Cool.
playoff team at
Yes, I
3-0 to start
convinced
the season.
Tom.
like because I just like I look at the schedule and I put it all in like, oh, what's their record going to be, and sometimes taking a step back to say, well, who are the other teams going to be? If even if they are
Right.
10-7, like who else is going to
10
get
and
to that
7 is
point?
going to get him a playoff spot.
Yeah,
So, like you
or
said,
actually
Tom,
maybe even 9-8 with the way that this is going. Because, like you said, Dolphins, I don't really see them making up much ground at all. I mean, depending on when Tua comes back, if Tua comes back, in what condition he is going to be able to play and how quickly. I mean, yeah, it's not even necessarily a matter of the straight up and down wins and losses for them. It could just be circumstance allows them to make the playoffs as the team that they are,
right?
and they're going to play sound fundamental football. I mean, they have no problems. In fact, they might actually kind of really enjoy playing games where it's 18-10 and 13-6 and
They
twenty to
won. They
ten.
won without scoring a touchdown, Tom.
Yeah, like
They
that's
they know how to win ugly. They do that
exactly.
very, very well.
And it'll be interesting to see, I think, for the Steelers as the season goes on. They're in this really unique spot where they can keep going with Justin Fields until he starts playing bad enough that all of a sudden Russell Wilson is healthy. And then this way you can make a quarterback change without necessarily benching a quarterback. I will be interested to see if Justin Fields continues to develop because it feels like he's playing a little bit cleaner. And that's, like I said right off the top of the show with the
Better
Vikings,
offensive line.
better offensive line, better coaching, putting you in positions to succeed. You don't necessarily have to be slinging it for 350 yards, Patrick Mahomes style. If you're a better runner than a passer and you kind of complement your game that way, that could end up working very easily. I mean, 6 points is 6 points no matter how you get them. So Steelers definitely in a good position. We'll swing back really quickly to the NFC. Have a couple of 2-1 teams out of the NFC South. Neither of them, the Atlanta Falcons, to start the season. We've got the Saints. We've got the Bucks. So, Common, let's do a little bit of juxtaposition here with these two teams because I think they've found themselves in kind of some interesting spots, especially to start out the season. The New Orleans Saints, I think it was they had like 18 days of no shootings or no murders or something like that. We'll see what's happened since the Philadelphia Eagles beat them this past week. But for a little while there was peace in the
Happiness.
bayou. Yeah, there was. So
Happiness.
long as the Saints are winning, Clint Kubiak is curing the city of all violent crimes and everything. But where are you leaning with these two teams coming? Do you think both of them are going to be playoff contenders, whether we want to say that's divisional wild card, both wild card? How do you kind of like line up these two teams?
I think they're both a little bit fluky, but they're definitely contenders in a pretty bad division. I mean, I think I look at they both have pretty easy schedules. In the NFC South, all the teams in the South have fairly easy schedules. It's tough, very tough. Where I want to put them exactly.
Hmm.
I look at that. I look at it as a three-team race: the Bucks, the Saints, and the Falcons. And I look at tiebreakers. I look at 9-8 might be good enough. 10-7 for sure to win the division. I mean, I'm looking at what kind of happened here early in the season, Tom Casselman, and it's very hard for me to kind of not trust these teams because if we did this question 2 weeks ago, the Saints are 2-0. I know they clobbered the Panthers, but they clobbered the Cowboys. They scored a touchdown every drive Carr has played. Meanwhile, we've got ourselves the Buccaneers beating the Detroit Lions, Tom Casselman. Such a terrific football team Detroit is. They knocked out the Detroit Lions. But then you look at what happened last week. The
Hmm.
Bucks at home lose to the Denver Broncos, who were 0-2 with the rookie quarterback, as one of the announcers said, look like Patrick Mahomes out there.
Hmm.
Baker Mayfield, who played amazing football, all of a sudden is making mistakes we've seen him make in the past. Then look at the Saints' high-powered offense putting up 40 points a game or whatever. They couldn't get in the end zone until like with 2 minutes to go in the game against the Eagles, who, by the way, Philadelphia's defense prior to that game looked really bad. They
Hmm.
didn't play good against the Packers. They certainly didn't play good against the Falcons at the end of the game. And the Saints couldn't do diddly squat against them. So I look at both of these teams, quite frankly, on both sides of the ball, offense and defense, highly inconsistent. I actually think Tampa's a little bit better team because I trust Baker Mayfield oddly a little bit more than Derek Carr, but it's a classic scenario of one week those quarterbacks look great, the next week we don't know. It's kind of the same way with both of these teams. So they're both like neither is a legitimate Super Bowl contender. They're both definitely playoff contenders because they play in the South, but I don't see the South getting two wild card teams. I see a lot
Mhm.
of NFC North wild card teams. We could have three NFC North playoff teams. The Vikings, Packers, and Lions. I hate to say it, but
Maybe 4.
the way the Bears look, that'd be nice.
Could be 4.
The Bears' schedule is so easy. God, it's
Yeah,
crazy. But
squandering it.
I mean, NFC West might get two, Seattle and San Fran potentially. We'll see with Dallas, but I don't trust either of these teams, Tom.
Mhm.
I simply do not trust either of these teams. So I'm going to say they're both sort of fluky, at least the first two games. But I think they're both definitely playoff contenders because they're in the NFC South. Like
Mhm.
I would say, I can't say NFC South is the worst division because it's definitely the AFC South. But as far as like second worst division, could we say it's the NFC South? I think that's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah, I'd say that's more than fair, to put that because they don't really have that top heavyweight contender. I think that the Falcons, the Saints, and the Buccaneers all kind of fall into this category of mercurial. I kind of find myself wanting a little bit more information on the Saints at the very least. I feel pretty confident in the Buccaneers, and the Buccaneers to me strike me as this perfect. Are they 8-9? Are they 9-8 type of team? I mean, they had a win against the Commanders team that played well against the Bengals. Jaden Daniels had a really good Monday Night Football game, but to kind of start out the career, Commanders not necessarily so great. I know that their offensive line has some issues. Not really a great strong unit there. Then you go on the road, you have a pretty strong win against a tough Detroit Lions team as the Buccaneers, and then you have this really bad loss at home to the Broncos. And I'll attribute a little bit of that to them missing Kalijah Cansey and Vita Vea. So it could be simply that they were just undermanned, underpositioned. The Broncos defense is surprisingly a little bit stingier, perhaps, than we anticipated heading into the season. Patrick Surtain is a star at cornerback,
Like Papa.
and that's that could be a unit that's a little bit better than we suspected. So I mean, I look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2-1 with a point differential of +2. That seems like it kind of fits the bill where we could go either way with them. The Saints are the team that I can't really figure out because they start out so well against an awful Panthers team to begin the season, and we say, okay, like, yeah, this is all fun and games, great way to kick off the season, but they've got Dallas coming into, and then they go out and they smash against Dallas. The thing that I kind of like have to step back a little bit and think about is we've seen this happen with Dallas before, where they just have these
Yeah.
random
You don't
blip
know what team it
games.
is.
It's just like, oh, last year it was a Cardinals team that we kind of all sort of pegged as like maybe they don't win a game with Kyler Murray out for the season, and who knows what's going on. There's no talent on either side of the ball. I mean, they managed to put together a couple of wins. The Cardinals did, one of them being against the Dallas Cowboys in a surprising win. So it's these are two teams where I think it's too early in the season to really make a determination one way or another on them. If I had to lean a certain way, I mean, I think it's early enough that I would still kind of lean Falcons
Same.
to
I'm
win
picking the
this
Falcons.
division.
After watching the Sunday night game, the Falcons
Yeah.
actually have a pretty good defense. They actually got two offensive linemen hurt against the Chiefs. That first week, a great Steelers defense, quarterback coming off an injury, new offense, new system. It did not set up well for them.
Hmm.
I like the Falcons. If I had to pick one team to win the South, it's definitely a three-team race, but I would go Falcons 1, Bucks 2, Saints 3 personally.
That sounds about right. Yeah, I think I'd be in pretty good lockstep with you on that one. So that'll wrap up kind of the are they contenders? Are they pretenders? Now we're going to go to some of the teams that we kind of thought would be good heading into the season. And to be
And
fair,
let's lump Dallas in here too. I know I didn't put them in the rundown, but I
hmm,
know I think I have what San Fran. I have the
no, you've
Bengals
got
and the
Dallas in here.
Ravens. Well, I
Yeah,
do
you
have
got
Dallas in
Bengals,
here.
Ravens, 49ers, and Cowboys. These are 4 teams that we
Okay,
said,
my
were
bad.
division winners or like the first wild card team that we were thinking
Hmm.
about. And this is a situation where over the course of a 17 game season, you can pull out a 3 game snippet of a lot of teams and find 1 and 2 sections or 0 and 3 sections,
Sure.
perhaps. 0 and 3 is a little bit more concerning, but 1 and 2 certainly. So let's start with the most concerning team, the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that, uh, scored on every possession against the Washington Commanders and still lost. What's your level of concern for the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that, Joe Burrow missed game for myriad reasons last season. You had T. Higgins in and out last season. So you say, okay, coming into this season, everybody's getting healthy, everybody's getting ready to go. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, nobody's actually really practicing because all these guys that want to get paid, that's not happening. And we're worried a little bit about Joe Burrow because it's like, oh, I just keep flexing my hand. It's become second nature to me to flex my hand and my wrist. And we all kind of think to ourselves, well, it's not second nature to any of us. It's kind of a weird thing to have as a second
Right.
nature habit that you picked up. So how healthy are you really? And to start the season, I mean, it's been up and down for the Bengals. They had a really
It's
really
been
close
mostly
game,
down.
a debatable win against the Kansas City Chiefs, depending on how people say, "Oh, the refs this, the Chiefs
The
that." Like that
call
was a
that
game
call was an easy call. The Falcon one
that
was debatable. The call against the Chiefs was, if that wasn't called, I would have felt the Chiefs were robbed. That was one of the easiest calls I've ever seen. By the
I would
book,
say the
very
the Falcons
easy.
one was the easier of the two calls. I think they're both the correct calls.
I would say the Falcon call is 50-50. The Bengal call
Oh,
is 99-1. I thought it was so extremely blatant that one
eh.
for me was not a debatable one
But
personally.
that's but essentially what I'm getting to with my point on that one is that the Bengals were in that one
Could have gone
against the
either way.
Kansas City.
That's fair.
They absolutely
We
could
have
have
seen that
won that
call
game.
called different ways. That is
Sure, but
fair.
like
That
if
is
they were there,
fair.
it was literally if it's not DPI, if it's either not called or the defender gets there a half second later, the Bengals are 1 and 2, and they're still perhaps on this list, but with a definite different connotation to how they've started the season.
Yes.
Had a disappointing loss. I kind of write off that loss to the New England Patriots as nobody plays in the preseason. And to circle back on my point, I got sidetracked there. No T. Higgins and no Jamar Chase for like a lot of training camp, and T. Higgins starts the season not playing with a hamstring injury. And so that's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, week 1's kind of an extension of the preseason. I can understand the Bengals dropping a game to the Patriots, even though the Patriots are not a very good football team. Play really, really tight against the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, I can chalk that up as a loss and feel pretty okay about that on in a vacuum of a single game if I'm a Bengals fan. This loss to the Commanders and now putting it together with these other
Makes no
two
sense.
isolated events, we have a little bit of a pattern here that has developed. So how concerned are you for the Cincinnati Bengals? Do you think that they have the runway with these next 14 games to perhaps build themselves into a playoff team, or do you think this might actually be the year that even with a healthy Joe Burrow and healthy wide receivers for most of the season, that the Bengals are not able to overcome, to not be on the defensive side of the ball, the sum greater than the parts, and they're
Yeah,
outside looking in?
they're toast, Tom. I mean, 0-3, you
Toast.
got to be perfect. They're toast. Do I think they can regroup and finish above 500? Probably, but they are 0-3. All three of these two losses are conference losses. And to me, you're talking about Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. You're talking about Joe Burrow. What the heck happened to the defense? Like,
Mm,
what in the world? The Commanders, by the way, Jaden Daniels looks great. The Commanders' offense is clearly above average. They have a good offense, but 38 points? 38 points. They could not stop the Commanders to save their lives. I mean, like, New York Giants are okay on defense. Tampa is like decent on defense. Washington did not look anywhere near this explosive the first two games.
mhm,
They looked okay. They looked serviceable. They looked decent. That's a what, like average to above average offense. I mean, I think maybe by the end of the season with Jaden Daniels above average, but I don't think that's a top 10 offense. I
mm.
mean, offensive line is okay, running backs okay, receivers are a little bit above average, but nothing special. Jaden Daniels is probably about average at this stage, maybe a little bit above average, but like you don't look at their team and look at that as such a high powered incredible offense to put up 38 points. The Bengals were at home, Tom Casselman, in Cincinnati. What are we doing? They will get better. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, those guys will get better. But we talk about people figuring teams out. Have people figured out the Bengals defense? And I know the Bengals coach gets a lot of love, but I think he might be overrated, Tom, because these early season starts speaks culture, and there's something not right with the culture there. Because keep this in mind, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both virtually want to be out of Cincinnati or get paid big money right away. That's your top two receiver targets have issues. Joe Burrow is spending more time on his haircut than actually playing out there on the football field. I mean, come on. He looks like Ellen DeGeneres, Joe Burrow does, by the way. Forget Eminem. I call him Ellen DeGeneres personally. Are they a dangerous 0-3 team? Are they one of the best 0-3 teams of all time? Yeah, they are. They're really good for an 0-3 football team.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually should have done research on this, and I've been super busy. I don't know. I'll look it up. Maybe you can look it up if you have time. How many 0-3 football teams have made the playoffs? Because I know 0-2 is really hard. If they were 1-2, Tom, I might say yes. AFC North, they got to play the Ravens twice. They got to play the Steelers twice. Browns don't look as good, but they're not a terrible team. They're in the AFC conference, Tom. That's a tough conference.
So I've got the numbers here. If you'd like me to go over them really quickly.
0-3 teams to make the playoffs.
Since 1990.
Okay.
And a little bit skewed because we have gone to 17 games. It gives a little bit more runway.
Sure.
But since 1990, there have been 162 teams that have opened the season 0-3.
Okay.
Only 4 of them have made the playoffs.
Okay.
So that's 2.5% of those 4 teams. 2 of them wound up winning their divisions.
It's going to be like the 9-8 Panthers or 8-9 Seahawks, some garbage like that.
Yeah, like that's let's see. Yeah, I'd have to like read through this entire article to find out who it is, but it's a small number. I think that the Bengals, I'm not going to say that they're toast, but they're
toast.
They're on the ropes. They are this close to a knockout because they're on the road this week in Carolina. This is a game that
a W, supposedly.
It has to be a win. This is a must-win game for them. This wouldn't necessarily be the case, but like this is. I just did a quick look over their schedule, and I'm just kind of assuming, okay, looking at their schedule and what I quote unquote think they should be able to win, I picked out 8 wins. Now, we weren't math majors, but 8 wins out of 17 games means you're 8-9, means that you're likely on the outside looking in for the playoffs this year. So that means
Eagles,
that they need to. Those are games I all have as losses.
Yeah,
so that's where as the Cincinnati Bengals, you have to not only win all the games you're quote supposed to win, you got to win the ones that you're not supposed to win too. And so that's going to be a real test for this team. I think that they've been banged up on defense. I think that they have, I think they had a bad game, and they had a bad game against the type of quarterback that can make it a little easier to have a bad game in Jaden Daniels, where he's a dual threat. So he is able to challenge all of your key players on, okay, we have to now read for the run.
Don't they play Lamar Jackson twice a season, dual threat quarterback? Sure. I know it's a little different, but I feel like they should be ready for that. Even like the Steelers scouting Justin Fields, Russell Wilson. I mean, they should know Deshaun Watson. I know he's not the same guy he was, but I mean, they play dual threat quarterbacks the whole division.
Yeah, and they just did not have a good game against the Washington Commanders for whatever reason. I think probably injury has a good amount to contribute to that, because I know they were pretty banged up on that side of the ball, but also that's a Commanders team that isn't particularly special, but certainly looked it on Monday night. So I think we're both having the Bengals on the outside looking in. I'm not going to completely write them off yet, just because we still have so much season to go. There can still be so many things that bounce the right way that the Bengals can earn their way in. But I think they're definitely, the most worrisome team that started out as a favorite. A team that I'm not worried about are the Baltimore Ravens. Their division division rival, and that's because Ravens kind of similar to the Bengals. Week 1, that's a game where okay, it can go either way. 7 points. It was a toe. If we're being
Yeah.
honest about
That toe
what
won
the
me money,
difference
money, money. Chiefs
that
minus
that
three, Tom Casselman.
that's one where if maybe I know like it was a little bit of a taunt afterward, but if Isaiah Likely's wearing white cleats, maybe there's not enough
Yeah,
conclusive evidence. That's how
Patty.
close it was. And the Baltimore Ravens going for two, they could be 2-1. And then they had, like I said earlier, AFC North teams just have these weird losses. Somehow, some way, the Raiders beat the Baltimore Ravens. It's not even the way that the Raiders claim they want to win games. Amir White led the team with 24 yards rushing. It was Gardner Minshew slinging the pill around the yard.
Choo!
That finding Devontae Adams in kind of a very very poor but more entertaining man's Aaron Rodgers Devontae Adams combination. But then, of course, like I said, Ravens go and they get right by mollywopping the Dallas Cowboys in prime time there. So I would say I'm not terribly worried about the Baltimore Ravens. I think this is kind of like you had that tough game week 1. For whatever reason, you just got outplayed week 2, but there's still so much runway on the season. You beat the Dallas Cowboys. You still control your destiny in a very, very big way. You still have all your divisional games coming up, and that's really the key with the Bengals as well. Just to kind of like wrap up, these two teams in the AFC North, because all the divisional games are yet to come. You really control your own destiny in a lot of ways because when it comes to divisional tiebreakers, it's that head-to-head in division record. And then of course they're all AFC teams, so that also counts toward that tiebreaker as well. So the Ravens,
Does,
I'm not terribly worried about them. They played a mostly good game against the Kansas City Chiefs, a mostly poor game against the Raiders, and a very good game against the Cowboys. So I think that it's just kind of like working out the kinks a little bit, and they'll be fine.
doesn't 0-3 and 1-2 just feel so much different?
Hmm.
Like, doesn't it though? Because like if the Bengals were 1-2, I would probably lean them making the playoffs versus 0-3. I have them in the toast category. You got to play almost perfect because with the tiebreakers and the one game scenarios, Ravens. So they're definitely a playoff contender, but I am very concerned about this football team, and I've always been concerned about them because they are not a win close game type football
Hmm.
team. They're blowing all these leads. We see them in the
Oh.
playoffs. They choke all the time. Like I'm concerned in terms of them being like a top level contender because everyone has the Ravens as one of the best teams in the league. I'm not so sure they're one of the best teams in the league just because I look at their team. I look at their offensive line is taking a step back with some injuries. Their defense has looked not so good. I don't know if it's Patrick Queen going to the Steelers, but their defense to me is very,
Mm.
very concerning. Uh, I would lean they make the playoffs just because I look at that Cowboys game, and part of it is the Dallas Cowboys and their lack of run defense. But the Ravens passed the ball 15 times and they ran the ball 45 times, Tom. I think one of the most important things for the Ravens is to really work hard on trying not to make Lamar Jackson a passing quarterback. Because as a passing quarterback, Lamar Jackson is a slightly below average passer in the National Football League. For a starting quarterback, he's not a top 15 passer in the league for me. He's a top 10 quarterback overall because of what he does running the ball. He is
Hmm.
probably either number 1 or number 2 all time as a running quarterback. The only guy that compares to him is Michael Vick. It is Lamar Jackson and Michael Vick as running quarterbacks. Lamar is a better passer than Vick because Vick
Hmm.
was clearly below average. Lamar's in that average to a little bit below average category. I actually think Lamar's actually an even better runner. He's a little bit more the spin move, a little bit stronger. But if the thing about the Ravens that's super tricky, Tom, is they can be one of the best teams in the league if they run Lamar Jackson all the time. And that's a very, very tricky thing to do because, as we know, he's got an injury history, and running your quarterback a lot creates injuries. Lamar had 14 carries for 87 yards. If Lamar Jackson gets 14 carries a game, the Ravens will beat 80% of teams, if not 90, if not 95. Is that sustainable during a season? I'm not sure. But they can definitely be a really good football team if they run the ball. I felt, unlike you, Tom, that Derrick Henry would be a feature back. He would not split carries. He would be the guy. Their one win, 25 carries, 151 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. If they give the ball to Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, they are a top 5 football team to run the ball. If Lamar Jackson rushes less than 10 times a game, they are not a top 5 football team. They are somewhere in that top 10 range because Lamar is unbelievable with the run. He is so amazing at that. He is not a passing quarterback. That is why the Ravens have zero chance to win the Super Bowl. That's why I trust them none at all in the playoffs. That is why they always choke, because in the playoffs, you got to be able to pass and run the ball. In the regular season, if you have Lamar Jackson and he's willing to run the ball, you're going to win. My good feeling says, Tom, if they're looking up at the schedule, if the Ravens are like 7-7 through 14 games or like 7-5, they're going to run Lamar a lot because they're going to see we have to run Lamar to make the playoffs. Ravens are super duper interesting though, Tom, because they play the Bills this week and then play the Bengals in Cincinnati the next 2 weeks. Those are 2 very tough games. Realistically, Tom, they go what, 1-1 in that stretch? Maybe they go 2-0. Maybe they go 0-2. But let's just say they go 1-1, and they're sitting at 2-3. The margin for error gets tricky. So I'm about 55% sure the Ravens make the playoffs, and I'm about 50% sure they win the division because that's AFC North is very winnable all of a sudden. I think they're going to do what they need to do to win because my gut feeling says they're also watching these football games. They're seeing what Lamar does as a runner. They're seeing what a Lamar-Derrick Henry running duo presents for the opposition. So I think they're going to get there, but Lamar could get hurt running the ball a lot. And if they try to make Lamar into a passer, they have no chance. So I'll say in for the Ravens, but it's definitely not one I am by any means convinced on.
No, I'm pretty solidly convinced. And let it not be said that Kamen, who loves efficiency, is going against a passing quarterback who completed 12 out of 15 passes, only 3 misses.
Easy to be efficient when guys are wide open when you're setting up the pass by running the ball, Tom.
I think that if you want a fish to do well, you don't tell it to climb a tree. So I think that that's the Ravens would be well served to accentuate the strengths of their stars and their individual players. I think that they could have gone to the Super Bowl had they done that last season. Perhaps
Thank
even had a
God
shot to
they
win
didn't.
it. I know, like that's one of those ones where you got to spend an entire offseason looking in the mirror and thinking to yourselves, okay, well, yeah, we want to be able to pass the ball, but take what the defense is giving. And if the defense is saying, hey, you can run all over us all day if you want to, please be my guest. And actually, I know we've had this flipped in the rundown, but since we're talking about the Ravens and the Cowboys game, let's
quick,
talk
Tom,
about them, boys.
Real quick. The Ravens lost to the Raiders. They threw the ball 34 times and ran it 27. The more they run, the less they throw, the more they win. That is the recipe for them. If they could be near 50-50, like the Chiefs lost, 41 pass attempts for Lamar Jackson. They're not going to win football games with Lamar throwing the ball 30, 40 times.
That was
I'm not saying 15 is the solution, but I'm saying you gotta throw it like 20, 25 times, and you got to get Lamar 10 to 15 rush attempts a game. That's how you're going to win.
I think if you go for like 35 dropbacks, 35 to 40 dropbacks with maybe, like you said, 12 to 15 of those being ones where he's running, because ultimately that's one of the weapons that he has at his disposal. I think the Baltimore Ravens will be
weapon.
Really
it's the number one weapon the Ravens have.
It's a pretty good weapon. Flipping it over to the Dallas Cowboys, who, it was a 3-point loss, but you needed 19 points in the fourth quarter. That game definitely did not feel as close as the final score may indicate. And of course, the Cowboys also getting absolutely hammered by the New Orleans Saints as well. So they start off 1-2. They were a team that we both had them as a wild card team. I don't think either of us had them winning the
Wild
division,
card.
in no small part because there's the whole no repeat winners in the NFC East or
Hmm.
something like that, going back to 2004, what have you. But also because when I look at the Dallas Cowboys, I kind of see a little bit of like a house of cards, if you will, where they have some really good star players, but I kind of wonder a little bit about the rest of the roster around. I mean, we talked about how important the run game is for a lot of teams to this point, and the run game is not a place in which the Dallas Cowboys have really invested a lot of resources
Just
for
weird.
this team. I mean,
Weird.
we thought like the I think the Panthers traded above them to get Jonathan Brooks out of the draft, and it kind of feels like once the Panthers did that, after the Cowboys basically telegraphed that they would have taken Jonathan Brooks, the Cowboys said, "Well, if we can't have Jonathan Brooks, we just won't have anybody." And so they're rolling with Rico Dowdle. They're running with Ezekiel Elliott on the last legs of his career. They got Delvin Cook on the practice squad because
Deuce
I mean
Vaughn.
he's had a great career. Father time comes for everybody, and he comes vicious and he comes hard for running backs in particular. So you've got a road win, an impressive road win against a Browns team that I do not like for myriad reasons. The Saints spanked you. The Ravens for 3 quarters absolutely owned you in your own home. So now you've got a bounce back game, perhaps with the New York Giants.
Yep.
You still control your destiny if you're the Dallas Cowboys, especially in an NFC conference that is there for the taking. There's just a big blob of meh going on in the NFC. So, comment: are you at all concerned about the Dallas Cowboys? I put my alert at like 40%. Like it's starting to get there a little bit because I know they've got Dak, I know they have CeeDee Lamb and Michael Parsons, but looking at all the rest of the team, I think it's kind of fair to wonder, are there going to be some games that start slipping? Are they going to drop to the Lions, against the 49ers, the Falcons, even the Eagles, the Texans? Like that's a really strong stretch of games for the Cowboys where they're 1-2. They might not really have a great opportunity to climb out of this.
I'm gonna put it this way. If
Sure.
the Cowboys played in the AFC, they would not make the playoffs. That is the better conference, and they're not a top 7 AFC team. They might be like the number 7 NFC team. They are right there on the edge. We talk about winning the game at the line of scrimmage, Tom. Dallas currently statistically has the worst run defense in the National Football League.
Hmm.
They are the worst run defense. They just gave up like over 200 rush yards against the Ravens. You look at their rush offense averaging 3.6 yards per carry. It feels weird because they have Micah Parsons, a great pass rusher, but they've lost a couple of those secondary pass rushers. They've lost a couple, the running backs, the offensive linemen. We always say the game is won at the line of scrimmage. Well, the Dallas Cowboys are really, really bad at the line of scrimmage, like really bad. So I would be very concerned. They don't have a running game. They can't stop the run. Their passing game is decent, but I mean, outside of CeeDee Lamb, do we have a clear, reliable number 2? I know Jake Ferguson is decent at tight end. Brandon Cooks has some moments, but I mean, you saw what the Ravens did. They tried to take CeeDee Lamb out of the game, and it worked. It worked. When CeeDee Lamb is contained, you can contain the Dallas Cowboys. Now, containing CeeDee Lamb is a very, very hard thing to
Hmm.
do. That dude is, for me right now, the number 3 receiver in the National Football League, only behind Tyreek Hill and
Hmm.
Justin Jefferson. He is absolutely terrific.
Hmm.
But
That's a thin margin, I think. I
they're
think you
all
can
really
you could
close.
stack those guys in almost any order
I
you
agree.
wanted to, and I wouldn't
1A,
say you're wrong.
1B,
Yeah.
1C. Yeah, I
Hmm.
agree with that. It's going to be close for Dallas. It's going to be really close. Again, I don't trust the NFC South. Um, NFC North could get a few teams, though. NFC West might get 2. I mean, I don't entirely trust the Eagles either. I think Dallas is
Mm.
not completely out of the division. I'm going to lean they finish just behind Philly, and they finish just ahead of the hodgepodge of NFC teams and sneak in maybe get that 7th wild card spot, Tom. I mean, I do think the star players are there. I could not agree more with you. They need more depth on both sides of the ball. But I mean, look at CeeDee Lamb, top 3
Mhm.
receiver. Micah Parsons, top 3 pass rusher. Uh, I'm a Dak defender. I think Dak is awesome. I think he's a top 10 quarterback. He's not a top 5 quarterback. Like he's not the best quarterback. He's the highest paid. He's not the best, but I think he's in that top 10 range. Now, I think they have enough high level talent to sneak into the playoffs. But unfortunately for Dallas fans, it might be a one and done season. One guy Dallas does
They're
have that
familiar
is,
with that.
yeah, very familiar with that. Very familiar. Unless we talk about the 1990s. Just eliminate that from your vocabulary. Let's move past 1996.
Hmm.
And Dallas fans are very used to that. A guy that might, and I do mean just might, get him that 7th wild card spot, the new best kicker in the NFL. It's not Justin Tucker. It's not Harrison Butker. It is the best kicker I've ever seen in the history of the NFL, Brandon Aubrey. That guy is as automatic as it gets. He alone might win the Dallas Cowboys 2 football games with like 60-plus yard kicks.
Hmm.
The guy is absolutely ridiculous. Because of Aubrey, Tom, Dallas gets the final wild card spot. The kicker of all people.
Yeah, I mean, one last thing on the Cowboys. How much are they missing Dan Quinn, who's now head coach for the Washington Commanders, the job that he did for that defense? Certainly looking very, very different this year, even with
Yeah.
Mike Zimmer as their new DC. So we'll wrap up. We've got one more team to talk about here with the San Francisco 49ers starting out 1-2. And I mean, they were really close to being 2-1. I mean, this was a game that they had against their division rivals, the LA Rams, where
They choked.
it was borderline people in street clothes playing. Like borderline was like, how do we even have a game with the number of injuries that these two teams have withstood to this point? I mean, CMC, Christian McCaffrey has not played the season. Kittle and Debo both missing time.
He's going
Brandon
to
Ayuk,
Germany. Did you see that?
I
To
did.
visit a
That's
doctor in Germany. That's
I
concerning.
I I would say that is not a good sign if you have to
No.
leave the country in order to find a medical opinion for what you have going on for you. Brandon Ayuk, not in training camp as he was holding out for contract trade demands on and off. So, I mean, this was an opportunity for him to really step up. Jawan Jennings was the receiver who did step up for the 49ers, but they dropped the game to the LA Rams. They are 1-2. So kind of this to me feels like a team that they need to get healthy because the stance that I've held about Brock Purdy as the quarterback, I will continue to hold because it has not been proven otherwise to this
Get 3
point.
touchdown passes.
He needs to have the talent around him. He needs to be in a good situation in order to excel. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that because we can say the same thing of Sam Darnold. I don't think that's a pejorative thing, but we're
A
definitely seeing
what?
there's potential
There's your Tom
pejorative.
Casselman word. What does that
We
mean? I
got
have no idea what you just said.
disparaging.
Okay.
I'm not besmirching him when I say that he's not one of these quarterbacks that can succeed in spite of obstacles around him. I mean, yeah, had 3 touchdown passes to Juwan Jennings against an LA Rams team that's not particularly strong.
Most
Um,
of their injuries on defense.
I think that the 49ers, they just need to get healthy and they'll probably be fine as the season goes on. Like we talked about the Seattle Seahawks, soft schedule to start. They've got those 3 wins in the bank, but if we're saying, hey, there's 2 divisional matchups here, I'm going 49ers on both of those matchups. The Cardinals are making improvements. I think the LA Rams are, with that successful win over the 49ers, but with the number of injuries they have sustained, I don't necessarily think that they're particularly menacing. So this is one where the 49ers, not the ideal start to the season for them, but I think they have plenty of leash to get righted here and get right back on track.
Home against the Patriots, home against the Cardinals, on the road in Seattle. Next few games a little bit easier as they get healthier. Having
Hmm.
home games against New England and Arizona should set up well. I do disagree about Brock Purdy, by the way.
I
They
know.
lost that game because of their defense let them down, which that defense had some injuries too, but that 49ers defense was the reason they lost the game. They blew the game. Brock Purdy, without Debo Samuel, without George Kittle, without Christian McCaffrey,
Hmm.
Tom, 22 of 30, 292 pass yards, and 3 touchdown passes. He played well enough for them to win that game. Simply put, their defense blew the game. Jake Moody missed the field goal as well. Brock Purdy, I think,
Not the reason that they lost,
I think
but not the reason that they
he's kind of
overachieved.
in between a great quarterback and a solid quarterback. I know you have your categories of they win
He,
because
he's
of,
he's a
and they what's the
solid
other
win
one?
with quarterback. Yeah.
Win with, win
Hmm.
because of. He's right in the middle. I think he's closer to win because of than win with, personally. I'm not going to say he's at that great category, but I think he's closer to great than he is to good. I think this game proved it, by the way, without all those targets, how good he looked, Brock Purdy. I have the Niners. Now, I'm going to knock on wood. I don't know if you hear that.
Hmm.
Uh, I always wish for teams to be healthy. I'm going to hope for health because I think if you look at the Niners without Debo, without McCaffrey, without Kittle, I think even Trent Williams is banged up.
Hmm.
Fred Warner has been a little bit banged up. He's been playing like if you told me the team they played against the Rams would play for all 17 games, I would lean they just missed the playoffs with their current roster with all those guys out. If they get only even like one or two of those guys back, which is what they're expecting, even for like half the season, just on the roster alone, they're good enough to make the playoffs. So I'm going to say the Niners will be fine, but I do think they're definitely concerning because, I mean, when you have so many players injured, so many key players, that is concerning. And obviously,
Hmm.
like Debo Samuel, we've seen these reoccurring injuries. I'm a huge Debo fan. I feel really bad for the guy, but these have been reoccurring injuries. Christian McCaffrey, reoccurring injuries. We're not talking about guys that it's their first ever injury. Those two guys in particular, if you look at the last like 4 years, they spent almost as much time hurt as they have healthy. So I think the Niners have a lot of veteran leadership. They have a lot of savvy. They're certainly capable of winning road playoff games. But I think if you ask the Niners or any team, they'd rather be at home.
Hmm.
And for me as a 49er fan, I'd be very concerned about the seeding. Because, even if they somehow win the NFC West, they're probably not going to have as good of a record as the NFC North or NFC East
Hmm.
winner. If they're getting the 3, the 4 seed, God forbid the 6 or 7 seed in the playoffs, they have to win multiple road games. That's kind of where I'm concerned about them as far as their long-term Super Bowl plans. Because San Fran, you know what their goal is, Super Bowl or bust. They've been so close so many times. You tell the 49ers, you guys are going to squeak in the playoffs. You're going to win wild card weekend, and you're going to lose in the second round of the playoffs. They tell you, heck, that's a bad season. Like if they don't at least make the NFC Championship game, that's a bad season for San
Hmm.
Fran. So as far as what they're used to, yeah, I'm concerned for San Francisco. But as far as making the playoffs, I'm going to lean they get in. Keep in mind, that's a really good
Ah, they're
Minnesota team they
firmly
lost
in.
to. A
Yeah.
Minnesota team that beat them last year, that has their number for some reason. The Rams game was a little concerning the way they blew it, but I'm going to lean more. San Fran's going to be fine and
Yeah, I
still
think they're
find a way to make the playoffs.
yeah, they're firmly in. I mean, as far as this, good teams, preseason good teams, the only one that is of concern for me really is the Bengals. I think Ravens, 49ers, Cowboys. I think ultimately they will be fine with getting into the postseason. And speaking of the Ravens, we've got a lovely treat for Sunday Night Football this week. We have Bills, we have Ravens, we have an outstanding matchup where I know we've talked a good bit about the Ravens, so I want to talk about the Bills a little bit before we get into the picks because I think they are having a bit of an interesting season. Keep in mind, the
My
preseason,
AFC East pick,
I
baby.
had
Let's
I
go,
had the Jets
Bills.
1 and I had the Bills 2, and I was concerned how the Bills would be performing on offense by putting too much on Josh Allen's plate. He might just be able to handle that sort of workload. He might be able to go up to the buffet with not the little dessert plate or the salad plate or even the dinner plate. He might just be able to go up there with a whole
He's a
tray
man.
and just load it all up. And he's loading it up in a really interesting way because I saw this. I believe Mina Kimes had this one, or at least she's the person who put out the stat. And I saw
Yeah, the
this.
ESPN reporter.
Nobody on the Bills offense has a greater than 20% target share. Usually you'll see a larger percentage, a larger swing to a star receiver, for example. Think like a classic Aaron Rodgers. He has Devontae Adams or Jordy Nelson taking a bunch of snaps, and then he kind of peppers it around to other guys, but he has his go-to. There is no such go-to player for the Buffalo Bills. I came into this season thinking that's a bit of a weakness. That's a little bit of
Nope,
a red flag
not what
because
I
that's
thought.
something that could ultimately be, like I said, a little bit asking too much. And I will say it has worked pretty well for the Bills to this point, but it is still early. I'm still going to withhold a little bit of reservation on this one, in part because if we're looking at their strength of schedule, their strength of victory, that number is not good. They've beaten the Cardinals. They've beaten a Dolphins team that, again, I didn't think was that great even before Tua suffered that injury. But then once he did, that game was pretty much over on Thursday Night Football. And then they beat on Monday Night Football a Jaguars team that is not very good, to put it quite generously. So the Bills have looked good to this point. I think that they're a better version of the Seahawks, where we said, hey, you can't really control who you're facing when you're facing them. But the Seattle Seahawks had a soft start to the season by pure math, looking at strength of schedule and strength of victory. The Bills have had a soft start to their season as well. So I think that they have looked good, in part because they're a talented team. They're a playoff team at the very least. I think they've also kind of been helped along a good bit by the fact that the teams they've played to this point have not been strong on defense. The Cardinals, the Dolphins, the Jaguars, none of these teams are particularly strong defensively. So this is one where, I mean, I'd like to get your opinions on the Bills really quickly before we pick the winner of this game. I believe Ravens slight favorites as it's in Baltimore, so that makes perfect total sense. If we did the whole neutral site, this would be much closer to a pick 'em, if not a straight out coin flip. What are you thinking about the Bills so far this season? I know you're almost certainly more bullish on them than I
Yes.
am, uh, but I'd like, has anything I've raised caused any like slight concern, even if it's just like a little skosh of a concern for you to say, this could be something where maybe I'll pull back on the reins a little bit.
I mean, I guess I mostly agree their schedule has been fairly soft, although I think they looked dominant against the Dolphins pre-Tua's injury. I know
Hmm.
Tua had a couple of bad passes that were uncharacteristic, but I mean, I think the Dolphins with Tua, as we saw last year, are a playoff team. So you look at most of that game,
Hmm.
Tua was healthy most of that game, and they completely dominated that game. So I kind of look at the first half, and it's like pre and post Tua was a different Miami team. I think pre Tua injury, that's a pretty good football team, and the Dolphins absolutely mad handled them. And you talk about the preseason, Tom, being like it's a little fluky. Well, the Bills had a pretty bad first half against the Cardinals. You take out that first half against the Cardinals, they have played nearly 10 perfect quarters of football on defense, offense, and special teams. I agree the schedule was soft, but in the National Football League, you rarely blow teams out. It is extremely
Hmm.
rare. The Chiefs are the defending back to back champions. They've won 3 one-score games. All could have gone either way. They could be 0-3 easily. The Buffalo Bills, I know the Jaguars are not a good football team,
No.
but the Jaguars were not losing 47-10. 47-10. Jacksonville lost 18-13 in 2017, their first 2 games. They were
Hmm.
right there. This 47-10 shellacking felt different. I told you before the season started, Tom, that Josh Allen would be a better quarterback post Stephon Diggs. Same thing happened with Mahomes. When you're forced to scan the field, we don't have a clear number one. You're not targeting a star receiver. When you
Hmm.
have that arm talent that Josh Allen has, his vision, his ability to read the field gets better. And you combine, if he's even adequate at that, with his arm strength, he arguably has the best arm in the history of the National Football League. I mean, he can throw the ball
Oh,
like nobody else can. Strongest arm I've ever seen. I would say there's actually three guys, and one of them is absolutely awful, and I cannot stand him as a quarterback, and I'm completely right about him. The strongest arms in the league: Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Anthony Richardson. Although his accuracy leaves a lot to be desired, Mr.
real,
Anthony Richardson.
really quick, like Anthony Richardson, that reminds me of a joke, and it's this side tangent. I don't know why
No,
I'm even
hit me.
really getting into this. But there's this joke where it's on the golf course, this guy says, "Hey, I have this chimpanzee that I've been training how to play golf. He's amazing. Okay, watch. We're 310 yards away from the tee, and he says, watch what this guy can do." And he hands him a driver. And the chimpanzee like lines up the ball and he hits it and goes 300 yards, lands on the green 10 feet away from the cup, 10 yards away from the cup. And everybody's like, "Wow, that is something! I can't wait to see what he does."
He can't
When we get him on the green and we get him to putt, and they give him the putter, and the chimpanzee lines up the putter, and he swings and he hits the ball another 300 yards. That's what Anthony Richardson is in terms of he can make these amazing plays.
He's
But then
Happy
he
Gilmore
also,
before Happy Gilmore learned to putt.
but then he also like misses. What was I saw? It was a tweet. He's like, he can make a play that 99% of quarterbacks cannot make, and he also cannot make the plays that 99% of quarterbacks
100%
can
agree.
make.
But anyway,
Yes, but back to
Josh Allen can make those 99% plays, but
and
now he's about learning to not
yeah,
make those other plays. Josh Allen, 3 weeks in, Tom, 0 interceptions.
hmm
He's got 9 total touchdowns, passing and rushing the ball. His leading receiver has 14 catches for 168 yards. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I think 10 different receivers, maybe 11 if I'm counting correctly, have caught a pass this season. He's different. Josh Allen is different, Tom. We've been debating this for about the last 3 years on the show. Who's the second best quarterback in the league? I've always leaned Josh Allen. I've been between Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. I think
sure.
we've seen enough at this point. Burrow's been hurt the last couple of years. I think we've forever said the best quarterback is Mahomes, and the second best quarterback is the debate. There's no debate. Josh Allen's the second best quarterback in the league. I'm sorry, Lamar Jackson. You can take your 2 MVPs. You are not what Josh Allen is a quarterback. He can pass, he can run, he can do absolutely everything. And now that he's had to learn more about finding other guys, his availability, his accuracy, his ability to scan the field has gone to the next level. I mean, Josh Allen is probably going to win the MVP this year. I think like him and Mahomes are the 2 best. Mahomes is off to a rough start. Got a couple of receivers are banged up. A couple of running backs are banged up. If it's even remotely close by the end of the season, they're going to give the tiebreaker to the guy that has not won it yet. So, I mean, like right now, Tom, if I had to bet Josh Allen versus the field for MVP, I would take Josh Allen.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously, he looks really, really good. And that Buffalo defense looks really, really good. I know Jacksonville is not great, but anytime you allow 10 points of offense to an NFL team, and I think they got a touchdown in garbage time, the Jaguars did as well. It was like, I mean, it was ugly.
Yeah.
I like the Bills a lot. As a Chiefs fan, Tom, there's only 2 teams that have proven to match up with the Chiefs the last couple of years. Now that Tom Brady, the Patriots, and the Bucks are out of the league, it's pretty much the Bengals and the Bills give the Chiefs a hard time. Fortunately for the Chiefs, they always beat the Bills in the playoffs. But in the regular season, playoffs, we can't even win a game, Jim Mora. Playoffs. But as far as the regular season, Tom, goes, the Bills actually have a winning record against the Chiefs in the regular season. So as a Chiefs fan, what team scares me the most in the AFC? Far and away the Buffalo Bills. Far and away because, as I said on the show when we had our preseason preview, as long as Josh Allen is the quarterback of the Bills, they're the AFC East champs, and they are a legitimate Super Bowl contender. I have the Bills going into Baltimore, winning the game on the road, winning outright. Buffalo Bills They look like a better football team right now. Oddly enough, Tom, the Buffalo Bills defense looks better than the Ravens defense. Josh Allen looks better than Josh or Lamar Jackson. And how about James Cook? James
Hmm.
Cook looks like a top 5 running back. He is absolutely amazing. So I like Buffalo to win that game. I like Josh Allen to get the MVP. I think the Buffalo Bills will be fighting for that 1 or 2 playoff seed in the AFC. Let's see. They play the Chiefs on November 17th in Buffalo. That could decide the number 1 overall seed in the playoffs. So yeah, give me the Bills to win outright, getting what is considered an upset. You know what? I'm gonna have to make
Hmm.
a change in my locks of the week.
Go for it. No,
I don't have.
I kind of figured this one would be on there for you.
It's not on there, but I'm gonna edit it in.
I'm going to go with the Ravens. I think this is going to be our first fairly major disagreement on the show.
Figures.
I mean, it's about time that we would have this sort of thing. I mean, I
Mr.
like the
Lamar,
Ravens.
Mr. Anti-Lamar. That's us.
Exactly, exactly. So I think that Baltimore provides a tougher test than anything the Bills have faced to this point. So I think I'm going to go just by a smidge. I'm going to go with the Ravens. I probably would go the other way if this one were at home in Buffalo. But I'm going to go with the Ravens on this one. Definitely a treat for us on Sunday Night Football. Perhaps a playoff matchup, depending on how things shake out as far as the standings go.
Possibly.
Could be a little bit of a nice, fun preview there. And really, the beginning of what is a tough stretch or a bit of a crucible for the Bills. They have the benefit of being 3-0 to start, but they've got at Ravens, at Texans, at Jets. That's definitely 3 of the tougher teams on the schedule. It could be the toughest stretch of their entire schedule, given that those are all road games. I know that they've got back-to-back Chiefs and 49ers at home later on in the season.
Tough schedule.
But this is going to be a good spot where they're either going to kind of early on, perhaps, have a chance to ice away the conference as far as getting out to that early lead, or they could find themselves right in the middle of the pack, which is where the NFL seems to be ending up with a lot of teams these days. Even the good ones are ending up kind of in the wash for at least a little bit. 2 teams that we get a really nice divisional matchup, something that the NFL's kind of seem to be shying away from schedule-wise to start out the season. We get the Vikings, we get the Packers, and like I said with the Vikings earlier, if you want to talk about just coaching master classes here, I mean, we've got Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores doing a marvelous job for the Minnesota Vikings, and Matt LaFleur, who, dare I say, is the best coach in the NFL who does not have a Super Bowl ring to this point. He does an absolutely outstanding job, and look
I
no
do like
farther
Dan Campbell.
or look no further than
Yeah,
the job that he has done with Malik Willis as the
he's
backup
great.
quarterback. I mean, I know you're facing Indianapolis Colts and Tennessee Titans, 2 really, really soft teams, quite frankly, 2
Yep.
teams that we as we're learning more about these teams throughout the season, you've got a team that is not particularly interested in stopping the run, and a team that is really not interested in holding on to the football with their quarterback and Will
That's just
Levis.
Will
But
Levis, the worst
for
quarterback in
this
the
game,
league.
I'm going to go with the Vikings over the Packers, and I feel pretty comfortable saying that, regardless of Jordan Love's status coming into this game. He's definitely, I think, a more talented quarterback than Sam Darnold is. But coming back, there's going to be limitations on his mobility, even if he is able to play. It's certainly not going to be at 100% to this point, or as close to 100% as players can be. And I also think that this is going to be a really fun matchup to see Matt LaFleur against Brian Flores, and just the matchups back and forth against each other. I think that the Packers have gotten the benefit of a bit of a soft schedule to start the season. I know that they had a bit of a rough loss in Sao Paulo
Brazil.
to the Eagles to start the season. No better way to bounce back than to have a couple of AFC South opponents that are just ripe for the taking. The Vikings have had a tougher schedule to this point. I think that they've proven that they are at least a solid football team, if not a good one. This is an opportunity for them to have an early establishment. You start the first quarter of the season 4-0. You've got a tiebreaker to this point over a divisional rival. I think the Vikings give me them to win on the road. I know that they are the road team this week, but I do like the Vikings and a little bit of a revenge angle if we want to go with Aaron Jones as well. I know that he is more than contemplating a Lambeau leap should he score. And if you are of the persuasion, might be worth a little bit of a sprinkle there come this weekend.
I'm a little bit less confident than you in this game, Tom.
Sure.
I'm also going to pick the Vikings. It is interesting to note that the Minnesota Vikings traditionally do struggle at Lambeau Field. If this game was in Minnesota, I'd feel a lot more confident. Uh, I don't know who I would pick if Jordan Love were there and I knew he was 100% healthy. Beyond the injury part, let's even say he is 100% healthy. There's a sort of rustiness, right? I mean, he played almost the whole game the first game, but then he sits out 2 games, didn't play much in the preseason.
Hmm.
There's a sort of like, you want to be playing, you want to be fully in full swing. So uh, that's kind of why I lean. If he plays, he's probably better than Malik Willis, even at 75, 80%. But if I'm not 100% sure he's 100%, I'm going to lean the Vikings. Their defenses look good. The offense looks really good. Justin Jefferson's going to be a problem for the Green Bay
Hmm.
Packers. But I'm like about 53, 54%. It could go either way. The Green Bay Packers are very tough at Lambeau Field. Let me just put it this way, Tom. This one will not be in locks of the week because
Hmm.
if Jordan Love is healthy, Jordan Love goes out there and balls out. I can see the Vikings losing, but I'm a little biased as a Bears fan towards not cheering for the Packers. And any time where it's a 50-50 toss up, I'm going to go ahead and pick against Green Bay. Although, Tom, I did pick Green Bay to win last week and cover, and they were very beneficial to the wallet. But there is
Hmm.
a surefire betting strategy for anyone out there. Bet against Will Levis. That is the betting strategy because that dude is rough. The
Oofa. Yeah.
worst quarterback in the National Football League, Mr. Will Levis. So I think we got a couple more games on the docket.
Yeah, we have the Eagles and the Buccaneers. A couple of teams. Oh, we talked about the Buccaneers, the Eagles, not quite as much, but the Eagles with a significant, significant win against. They didn't get beat up by the New Orleans Saints. I guess that passes for at least some small victory there. To say nothing of the actual victory that they have. For me, I feel pretty good with picking the Eagles because even if these are two teams that are kind of middling, I like the Eagles a little bit better just as an overall team. I know they have some injuries with AJ Brown likely out, Devontae Smith. Last I checked, he's still in concussion protocol. I don't know if there's been any update there. But without either of those receivers able to go up against the Saints team that we both kind of agreed, the Saints Buccaneers kind of two sides of the same coin type of thing. These are two mercurial teams that we are not fully don't really have like a full picture on what they're going to be for this season. So I'm going to go with the Eagles on this one. We'll see if maybe they were able to figure a little bit something out on defense. I mean, certainly the Saints were damn near impossible to stop for most of this season. Eagles were able to slow them down in New Orleans, which is not a difficult thing to do. So I think I like the Eagles on this one. Saquon Barkley, I mean, can't believe I've talked this much about the Eagles without talking about Saquon Barkley and the job that he has done, certainly bucking the trend of running backs who go to a second team, not always faring particularly well.
He's
To
the
this
real
point,
deal.
he's bucking that trend because he is a special talent, and it also doesn't hurt to have an offensive line as talented as the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'll go with the Birds on the road over the Buccaneers. Although certainly this is more than a toss-up than it would be if AJ Brown and Devontae Smith were both definitely playing.
Yeah, this is also 100% toss up. To be honest, all the games you picked out could really go either way. They're all very, very tight games. I'm going to lean the Eagles as well. The Buccaneers are not great at stopping the run. And some of this was Bo Nix running, but I have it pulled up on my phone here, Tom. The Denver Broncos, who have by no means great running backs. They were led by former Mizzou Tiger Tyler Beatty, a guy I used to cover in college, with 9 carries for
Hmm.
70 yards, which is better than he's ever played. As a team, they got 28 carries, 136 yards on 4.9 yards a pop, and 2 rushing touchdowns. If Tyler Beatty, Bo Nix can do that to the uh, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, what can Saquon Barkley do? They're
Mm-hmm.
gonna lean on Saquon Barkley. Jalen Hurts, another guy, Tom, like Lamar Jackson. He's gotten better. He's a decent passer, but I look for Philadelphia to use Jalen Hurts more running the football. I know it poses an injury risk, but when you have a guy that's that good at that part of the game,
Mm-hmm.
run Jalen Hurts, run Saquon Barkley. Philadelphia Eagles win a close game because of the running game. I said this in the offseason. Saquon Barkley, Tom, is just like Christian McCaffrey. He's an incredible player. He had some injuries the last couple of years. He played behind a horrible offensive line. You put Saquon Barkley with a good offensive line, especially with Christian McCaffrey out. I mean, would you agree Saquon Barkley right now is the best running back in the National Football League?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Good luck, Tampa. Give me the Eagles in a close one. Revenge game. Playoff. I believe they
Mm-hmm.
met in the playoffs back-to-back years. I think the Eagles got them 2 years ago. Tampa got them last year. Give me Philadelphia to win a close one. All
All
these
right.
spreads, by the way, Tom, are like
Mm-hmm.
all right there. I'm looking at the spreads.
Oh yeah.
-2.5 for the Packers, -2.5 for the Ravens. We have, what's this one? This is the Eagles and Bucks -2. And they're all right there
This
on the betting
this is
line.
the NFL. This is the league that the NFL wants. This is everybody has a chance every single week. They want parity. It's good for myriad things, and saying nothing of the
Sure.
gambling. We'll wrap up our NFL picks, our big games with the Seahawks and the Lions. This is a big game because the Seahawks, like we said earlier in the show, 3-0 to start the season, but this is where it begins to get a little bit tough, and this is where I feel again pretty comfortable taking the Detroit Lions at home over the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks have been a little bit up and down with their passing game. I know Kenneth Walker the third. He is on the injury list. I don't know if he's questionable or doubtful. I know he's been out the past couple weeks for them
I
with
have
Zach
him on one of my
Charbonnet.
fantasy teams. I need him. Come
Yeah,
back, Kenneth,
yeah,
please.
needs to come back. I'm going to go with the Lions. I think that they're better on both sides of the line, and that's where this game is going to be determined in large part. And this offense for the Lions, even when it's not necessarily outstanding, it's consistent in how it involves all of its star and rotational players and getting everybody involved. So I think, and they have some big play potential too. I know that Jamison Williams last week was kept under wraps, but
Amon-Ra
Seattle,
wasn't. One of
Amon
them's
Ra,
going off.
it's pick your poison in trying to stop this offense, and they've got a quarterback at the helm who's a good distributor of the football. Good job of getting everybody involved with Jared Goff there. So give me the Lions in this one at home. Like I said, the Seahawks I feel are a little bit fool's gold, a little bit pretender because of the soft start to their season. This is where they face their first real test. I think that this is a measuring stick where they might find themselves a little bit short.
Yeah, I think of the 4 games we're picking: Bills, Ravens, Vikings, Packers, Eagles, Bucks, Seahawks, Lions. This is probably the one I feel the best about. Now I'm tempted to put it in locks of the week, but it's also the
Hmm,
biggest line, minus
sure.
3.5. So
Yeah, go for it.
we'll see about that when we get to that segment. But as far as this segment, yeah, Lions are at home. They lost at home last time. I
Mhm.
don't think the Detroit Lions are losing 2 straight home games. Last year, by the way, this was a big, epic game. I believe the Lions won a close game last year. Is that correct, Tom? I think the Lions won like a nail biter in a high scoring
Mhm.
shootout. Look for more of the same. I think the Lions are a little bit better on offense, a little bit better on defense. They have the home field advantage. 2 really good running backs, couple really good receivers. I do like Detroit at home to take out the Seahawks.
All right, so that wraps up our NFL slate. We're going to move briefly to the college side of the game where we have arguably, if not definitely, the game of the regular season. Comes nice and early, comes with both teams, the Georgia Bulldogs and the Alabama Crimson
Alabama.
Tide. Both of them coming off of bye weeks, both of them coming off of wins. Big win for Alabama, much closer than it ought to have been for the Georgia Bulldogs. If it's any consolation, the Bulldogs want to know in the SEC, whereas the Alabama Crimson Tide They don't have a single win in the SEC, Kamen. So how can you even think about picking them to win this game against the Georgia Bulldogs? Where are you going for this one?
Oh God, I don't know. I've been going back and forth on this game all
That
week,
this is
Tom.
a very much a back and forth type of game.
I typically have a betting strategy. I'm pulling up on my phone the most recent line right now. It is Georgia -2 at Alabama. My typical batting strategy is if Bama's plus money, especially at home, you
You
take
take
them.
them.
Uh, Alabama has won 8 of 9 games against Georgia. 8 of 9
Hmm.
for how dominant Georgia has been the last, I mean, 3 years especially. Bama does have their number. The lone Georgia win, by the way, in the national championship game a few years back, right? But something tells me Nick Saban is not there for this game. If Nick Saban were coaching, I might even lean Bama. I do like their new coach, but
Hmm.
Kirby Smart is currently the best football coach out there. Carson Beck is a really good quarterback. He's a first round draft pick. He had a really bad game against Kentucky. He's still a college kid, Tom, and college kids especially are prone to off games. He missed some passes he would normally make. I actually watched a decent chunk of that game. There was a couple of drives where Georgia got field goals or no points, where 1 or 2 touchdowns, that game all of a sudden becomes a 10, 14-point game.
Hmm.
I also like Jalen Milrow. He's a great dual threat guy. He's gotten better at passing. I think Carson Beck is a better quarterback. Georgia has won 42 regular season games in a row. 42, Tom. I have very little confidence. So
Hmm.
little confidence in this that I'm not even going to bet this game. And I love betting. But for the sake of making a pick, give me Georgia on the road. Georgia Bulldogs win a close game. I guess I'm going to pick Georgia. But man, I like the inside, the
Hmm.
pit of my stomach as a guy who's been a big Bama lover. Again, I don't think I've ever picked against Bama at home, like ever. But I think Bama might be the third best team in the country, Tom. But I think I'm looking at the top teams right now. For me, I think Georgia and Texas are currently the top dogs. So give me the Georgia Bulldogs, I guess.
I'm going to go with the Bulldogs, and I feel like much more confident and comfortable saying that than you do because just
Okay.
historically, I've never been a Bama fan.
I
So like
know.
this is like an irrational take because I think both teams have been pretty solid to this point. I think that Georgia kind of had like the best type of win that a coach
The
wants.
scare.
The scare where it's
Get
just
it
like,
out
hey,
early.
we had no business being a Bob Stoops decision to go for it instead of punt type of situation from losing that game.
Mhm.
So you have that scare win going into a bye week. I know Alabama has the bye week as well, but we know that Kirby Smart is proven as an SEC head coach. Kalen DeBoer, great run with Washington. He has certainly improved a lot through his career. He has earned where he is at presently. This is a little bit of a different setup though, because you could argue that you know how would Washington have fared last season against the Georgia Bulldogs had the Bulldogs made the playoff type of thing? Is that
They would have
something where
lost
Washington
just like everybody.
that's the thing where it's I know that Georgia, they always graduate a lot of guys to the NFL, but they just replace them. They're a factory
Every time.
basically. So I'm going to go with Georgia on this one. Of course, you've got 2 and 4 in the whole nation as far as the ranking systems go. So this is definitely one where an outcome either way wouldn't necessarily surprise me. I think the only thing that would surprise me is a blowout in either
Same.
direction.
Same.
So I'm going to go Georgia, just because I don't like Alabama, just general. Sorry to whoever I know that is from or does like Alabama. It's nothing personal. Um,
Alabama helmet, baby.
is that AJ
Amari
McCarron?
Cooper.
Oh,
No,
Amari
it's Amari
Cooper.
Cooper.
What did? Because McCarron wore 18 as a pro. I thought he also wore that in
They
college, but I
have
might have
these
that wrong.
weird 18 helmets. It
Yeah.
seems from the 2018 season, but he didn't even play for them in 2018. I don't know. There's some random numbers in Alabama, but
Oh.
this was gifted by one of my customers from Ultimate Autographs. They wanted, and they're like, "Kamen, I already have an Amari Cooper. Do you want it?" I was like, "I guess I'll take an Amari Cooper helmet." So
Well, congrats on that little bit of memorabilia then. So,
yeah,
so yeah, we've got a really, really fun game on Saturday. That's just going to be a great way. I believe it's a 6:30 Central, a
I'm
kickoff
gonna
on
watch it.
ABC. That's just like a chef's kiss way. You do whatever chores, errands, obligations that you have up to that point, and then it's football eve almost. It's a very nice way to kick off the weekend. So that wraps up our picks for the week as far as just the general topics that we have. Of course, we have our betting locks of the week, where Common, you and I start out the season 2-1, and funnily enough, the one loss that we had, we shared as we
We got
had
barbecued.
yeah, we got it was Texans and Colts. That was a 2.5 point spread. The Texans won by exactly two. So that was the one loss we
Do you know
had,
what
but
happened? Do you remember? Do you know what happened at the end of the game?
I don't think I had that one on because
Oh,
I've got rabbit ears
oh,
shadowing.
Tom. Oh man. The Texans were up, I believe, 9 points. It
Hmm.
was like 2 minutes left, or just under, or just over 2 minutes left. It's a fourth and goal from like the 3 or 4 yard line. The Colts need two scores anyway to win. They have to choose between kicking a field goal or going for the touchdown. If they kick the field goal, barring a crazy onside kick, we cover no matter what. They go for it instead. Anthony Richardson plows over two guys, carries like 2, 3 Texans with him, barely sneaks in the end zone. They had him wrapped up, Tom, and he plows him over for a touchdown. I'm not bitter about that game at all, as you can tell. So that one was the hashtag bad beat, but otherwise,
Yeah,
good
we
win
did
for
well.
me. Chiefs -3 over the Ravens by a toe. I don't know if you caught the end of that game. It's been a while since we did the show. You can tell it's been a few weeks because we're talking about week one. We're on to what, week four now. The Ravens sideline. Harbaugh had the two up.
Hmm.
If that likely foot is in, it's going to be either a 1 point Chiefs win or a 1 point Ravens win. Either way, the -3 does not hit for me. Thank God, Isaiah Likely. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Also, shout out to Lamar Jackson for missing a wide open Zay Flowers to play before
That was
that.
pretty bad. Yeah.
Shout out Lamar, baby. So this one, you know what, Tom? I probably should have gone 1-2. I might have gotten barbecued in the Houston Colts game, but the
Evened
Bears
out
game, Bears -4.5.
a
I was
gift.
literally trying to cash out my DraftKings bet. It wouldn't let me cash it out because DraftKings thought I had they didn't think I deserved any money. Because usually if it's like a pretty bad bet, if you bet like, for example, $100, which is I think probably what I bet on, it's something like that. If they think it's very unlikely of anything to happen, they'll give you like the cash out at $10. And I was trying to cash out for like $10 and do like a parlay with the $10. DraftKings themselves thought it was so over. There was no cash out option, Tom. The Bears were down, what was it, like 17-0 at the half, 17-3,
Yep.
17-3, and it was like a late field goal or something.
Hmm.
The Bears got 0 offensive touchdowns, but Will Levis gave him one. The punt team blocked one. Bears come back from behind to win 24-17, covering -4.5. You had Cowboys +2.5 at the Browns. By the way, Tom, you'll be happy to know that I rode your picks online because I thought Tom Casselman has the best picks. I also picked the Cowboys. Actually, went
Hmm.
Cowboys money line. That worked out as
Perfectly
well.
good. Yeah.
33-17. Eagles -2.5 over the Packers. 34-29. 2-1 week for the boys. Like last season, both over 500.
Hmm.
Granted by an inch for myself, but
We'll
let's
take
see if
it.
we can have back-to-back years over 500, Tom. What do you got for this week?
Well, I've got three that you're probably not going to follow me on, and that's completely fine because I'm starting off with the 0-3 Cincinnati Bengals -4 over the Carolina Panthers. I think that
No, I agree
Andy
with
Dalton,
that.
you got a little bit of that dead cat bounce, that backup quarterback bounce, that benched rookie or not rookie, but benched first round pick bounce for the Carolina Panthers. Um, but Andy Dalton is definitely not a mobile quarterback. He's definitely not the type of QB who is going to be presenting any sort of a challenge for the Cincinnati Bengals
He looked
depleted pass
good.
rush.
Andy Dalton looked good.
Yeah, but he also looked good against the Raiders. And what does that really say? I mean, I know it's early.
I agree
Not
with
really
you.
convinced with Vegas. So, I mean, the Bengals need this one. They need it bad. They don't necessarily need it against the spread bad, but it certainly would feel a lot better if they got out of there with a touchdown or a 10-point win. I think they'd feel really, really good about that one. I think that T. Higgins, his first game back last week, you now have a little bit more rhythm, hopefully with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Burrow, so that they'll be able to throw the ball with a bit more consistency, maybe open up that run game a little bit more. So give me the Bengals -4 over the Panthers. Give me the Steelers -1.5 over the Colts. I know there's a little bit of a couple of players banged up for the Steelers, but we've seen the Colts the first two games of the season cannot stop the run. The Bears cannot run the ball, but we know that the Steelers can, or at the very least, they are going to try to. And if they don't, they're going to keep on trying, whether it's Najee Harris, whether it's Cordero Patterson, Jalen Warren, Justin Fields. This is going to be a team where, DeForest Buckner is on the injured reserve list. The Colts are depleted themselves. The Colts not even arguably, the Colts flat out, they should be 0-3 to start the season. The Bears should not have lost that game last week. That was an absolute travesty of a performance, particularly from the coaching staff. The players have a little bit to do with that too. So the fact that the Steelers are on the road, it's only 1.5-point favorite to them on the road. But I think the Colts are that bad, and I think the Steelers' defense is that good that we saw Anthony Richardson literally just say, "Screw it, have the ball." Like he on the goal line, where at the very least you can come away with 3 points. This is what a lot of coaches will talk about, especially nowadays, of 4-point plays. If you can take a probable touchdown, turn it into a field goal in this league, you count that as a win. And Anthony Richardson said, "Well, what if we just got a 0-point play? Here you go, Tremaine Edmonds. Enjoy the safety. Take the ball to the 20-yard line,
Thank
and
you.
you guys can just like all fall down, playing ring around the rosy on 4th and 1 or fourth and goal on the goal line there." Anyway, I'm much far afield. It's getting late. Steelers -1.5 over the Colts, and then I don't like what I'm doing with this, but I'm going to do it anyway. The Bears are favored by 3 against the Los Angeles Rams. Kamen. I'm going to take the Bears -3 against the Los Angeles Rams.
Do it. I
What
hope
are
you're
your
right.
picks?
First off, Tom, I'm not picking any of those. The first two I agree with. I agree with both of the first two picks you have. I might have to ride it. I'm not too sure about the Bears Rams game. I have this like. By the way, I'm 1-0-1 betting on the Bears because I bet the Bears week 1. I bet the Bears week 2. I washed it +6. I stayed away week 3. I'm probably going to stay away this week from betting on the game. It could go
You
either
should. You
way.
should be smart.
A very
I'm
banged
not.
up
I'm choosing
team.
to not be smart. I'm choosing to just let.
Let me put it this way, Tom. I
Hmm.
originally had this game, a game circled that I wanted to go to. I was going to buy tickets for this game,
Hmm.
but I've been so disgusted by the Bears' offensive line. I have decided I would rather not spend my money to watch that poor product. On top of that, I'm a
If
Matthew
it's
Stafford fan. I'm a Cooper Kupp fan. Tons of injuries for the Rams. I would say about 40% of the reason I wanted to go was to watch the Rams, 60% to watch the Bears. My enthusiasm for that game has waned. At raining conditions, kind of want to have a relaxing weekend at home. I've opted not to go to the game. That tells you how pumped I am about the Bears at the current moment.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I watched I watched too much Hard Knocks. They got me good, Tom. They just
I
reeled me in.
told you it was
So,
that was a fluff fest if I've ever heard
did
of it.
you
I didn't
watch
even
it?
watch. I did not watch a minute of it, but everything I heard was just like that was just fluff piece after fluff piece, and
Yes,
ice
it
cream
was.
museum, and this and that, and
Oh, I
no
want to go
actual
though. I want to
football.
go because of it.
I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm glad the ice cream museum got a little something
Yeah.
out of hard
All
times.
right.
So
Well,
what are
hey,
your picks of the week?
I have one pick that I feel good about. I'm going to go Cowboys -6 at the Giants. Last year, Dallas beat the Giants by like 30, 40 points both games. Actually, 49-17 and 40-0 last year. The Dallas Cowboys run defense is worse in the league. It's a good matchup. The Giants are a horrific running team. They have no offensive line. Micah Parsons is going to get some sacks against Daniel Jones. I think that Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb will look really, really good. Dallas -6 in the get-right game. It's the Dallas Cowboys. 1 week they blow you out. The next week you get blown out. They're coming off a loss. Need a big performance. Primetime Cowboys -6 at the Giants. I have 2 written down, but there's also 2 that I'm tempted on. So I have 4 picks I'm considering, Tom. One of them is Falcons Saints over 42.5. Another one is the Cards Bengals over 50.5. Not Cards Bengals. I apologize. That is the
Cards and
Cards Commanders.
yeah.
Cards Commanders over 50.5. Then the other 2 are the Bills +2.5 at the Ravens.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one, I feel like I can't bet on this game because there's just so much bad quarterback play. But I also have a betting strategy, Tom, and it's worked all 3 weeks. Bet
Roll with it.
against Will Levis.
Roll with it.
But I'm going to pivot. I'm going to mix it up. Normally I don't pivot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go Tennessee, Miami under 36.5. We got some really, really bad quarterback play. I'm going to go under on the points. Second, third stringer for the Dolphins. Will Levis for the Titans. Give me the under instead of having to pick a winner with those 2 atrocious teams. I am leaning Miami.
Going Shakespearean here.
I am picking Miami in the pick 'em, Tom, but give me under 36.5 points.
On both your houses.
And
that's what Kamen has done.
Bills, I'm going to eliminate the Cards Commanders. That's a lot of points.
Yeah.
Even though I think it's going to happen. Falcons Saints over 42.5 or Bills +2.5 at the Ravens. My logic, Tom, is that Cousins and Carr can sling it. There's some good skill position players in that game. 42.5 points is not a lot. But you know what? I want to see Josh Allen win. I'm going to go Bills +2.5 against the Ravens. The Bills are a better defense. They're a better football team. They got the better quarterback with the 2.5 points on the road. Give me Buffalo on the road +2.5 at the Ravens. I think they're going to win outright, Tom. Mm-hmm. So why not take the 2.5 points?
Exactly.
The money play is Buffalo money line, by the way. So I'm going to go with Bills +2.5. Miami, Tennessee under 36.5. And the one I feel the best about, Cowboys -6 at the Giants. Now watch this, Tom. My 2 overs, Falcons over 42.5, Cards Commanders over 50.5. Those 2 will probably hit instead of, and I'll miss the other 2, but that's okay. I'll probably bet all 5 elsewhere anyway.
Well, so long as it's Malik Neighbors putting up like 17 touchdowns, I'll be happy with that.
Yes.
On to
Tom's fantasy team, 3-0, unstoppable, baby.
So far,
you are on to something.
It's early on in the season.
No, you're gonna win again, and I hate it.
We don't know that.
Me and my girlfriend have already decided you're gonna win. We've already penciled you in as the champion.
That's bold. I appreciate the confidence. I do not share that with you in the slightest.
Okay.
Let's move on to trivia really quickly before we get into our statements of the week. Kamen, do you have like one that's perhaps more topical, one that's more evergreen? Because I know you mentioned you had a couple that you were maybe looking at.
Yeah, they're both extremely topical. I took screenshots. Okay. I'll go with the quarterback one. Because you might be able to name all the quarterbacks. If you watch the Sunday night game, you might know this one already. But fewest games to 40,000 passing yards NFL history. Can you name the 5 quarterbacks and how many games? Mahomes is not one. He's only played 99. Which, by the way, the other trivia question, I had 3 actually. I forgot about the third one. But the first one is Mahomes is the fastest to in 100 starts. He's got more wins than Roger Staubach and Tom Brady. 99 starts, I believe 77 wins. He'll have the most wins through 100 starts. But fewest games to 40,000 passing yards NFL history. Can you name the top 5 quarterbacks? I'm going to go ahead and give you the numbers. 147 games is the least. 151 is the second least. Then 152 is the third least. And 2 guys are tied at 153 each. So the 5 quarterbacks, fewest games to 40,000 passing yards.
The one that jumps to my mind first is Matthew Stafford.
Number one of the most underrated quarterbacks of all time.
Indeed.
I think all 5 of these guys are very underrated, in my opinion. I'm a big fan of all 5 of these guys.
And I might be wrong on this one. I think most of them are going to be of the quote common or current era of football, so to speak, just because of how the game has changed. Let's go with Matt Ryan. Matty
wow,
Ice.
the number 2. 151 games.
By the way,
Casselman.
I did not. I did watch Sunday Night Football in part. I think I missed like the first half of that game. So I probably missed this graphic. So for anybody who's thinking maybe I saw it and memorized it, I did not. This is purely off of what I'm thinking. So Matthew Stafford, Matt Ryan.
Both should be Hall of Famers, by the way. Do you agree?
Come
on. Hall of Fame quarterbacks, both of them.
Stafford, yes.
Matt Ryan has an MVP. He's top 10 all-time in passing yards. Top 10 all-time in passing yards.
But
top
he doesn't have the Super Bowl ring, which I know, like it or not.
Top 10 all-time in passing yards.
I would put him in over Eli Manning. I think they both get in.
Yes, thank you. Hall of Fame quarterback.
Even though
I'm not saying he's a top 10 quarterback, but he's a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Let's see. Did the Colts and Peyton Manning throw it enough for him to be on this list? Okay.
2 of these 3 guys should be pretty easy.
Should be pretty easy.
1 is a little bit tougher.
Let's see. I don't think the Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger would be on this list.
Nope.
Has Dak Prescott played enough games to be on this list?
He probably has, but he probably doesn't have.
Oh, but he also had
he was more of a game manager his first year.
Yeah, that's the other thing I'm thinking. So, Philip Rivers.
Not Philip Rivers.
Not Philip Rivers. Drew Brees is contemporary.
Drew Brees is number 3 on this list.
They didn't throw enough with Tom Brady, so it would not be him. I don't think. Is Tom Brady on this list? Okay. I mean, he's like Peyton Manning. Like whenever there's a quarterback list, you have to at least throw the name out there.
Yeah, I'm surprised Peyton Manning's not here. I'm willing to bet that he probably took like a couple extra games and
possibly, yeah.
Close.
So let's see. So I have Stafford, Ryan,
Breeze.
So I'm missing 2,
and 1 is I think 1 you should get.
Okay.
The other one is very underrated, in my opinion. I kind of think both of these guys are actually kind of underrated. But one of these is an all-time great quarterback. That's the one you should get.
Is Dan Marino on this list?
Dan Marino, 153. That's the one I thought you should get.
He's like the one guy outside of the common era that ends up on these types of lists because everybody else is, running the ball 30, 40 times a game.
Ahead of the curve, Dan Marino. 48 passing touchdowns in 1984, back when guys were getting 20 passing touchdowns.
You want to talk about head coach Don Shula, who's a little bit ahead of his time, or at least in terms of adjusting to the personnel that you have. Okay, who's the last guy? Prolific passer.
Probably the hardest one of the bunch, but I think he's very underappreciated. Probably won't make the Hall of Fame unless he has a late charge and gets a ring. Not Joe Flacco. Although if you look at the sheer numbers perspective, I could make a case for the Hall of Fame, but a lot of people, including yourself, would think I'm crazy to call this guy even near Hall of Fame level.
Is he still playing?
Yes.
Is it Russell Wilson?
Not Russell Wilson. He's he's 9-time Pro Bowl or Super Bowl champ. Russell Wilson's a Hall of Famer.
He'll be in the Hall of Fame. All right.
It's a very polarizing quarterback.
So not like an Aaron Rodgers.
Very polarizing quarterback for people.
Still playing.
Still playing.
He's not. Is he starting?
He's a starter.
No, Jared Goff was not good to start his career, so it's not him.
Nope.
Is it Kirk Cousins?
Kirko Chains, baby.
Yeah, I'd say that's a no on the Hall of Fame. That's a couple of bridges too far.
Okay. All right. I figured
I'm
you'd think I'm
I'm I'm a
crazy.
I'm a no on that one. I
I'm
think with
like,
good reason. I think a
I'm
lot
like,
of people.
look, I would lean no, but I'm like 48% in.
I would say
He
you
can
can
prove
look at
himself to get in.
numbers and you can look at how well the player played in myriad environments
And
and
I could also look at the Minnesota Vikings and Washington teams in the last 20 years. I know they look better right now, but typically Minnesota right before Kirk Cousins, without Kirk Cousins last year, Washington right before Kirk Cousins and post Kirk Cousins. He made those football teams look really good. Why did he not win in the playoffs? Because of the football teams, not because of himself. But
eh,
that could be a whole nother debate.
eh.
I would still lean no, but the
Look,
numbers are there, Tom.
I'm 2 feet, all 10 toes in the ground. No on this one.
I figured.
Let's move on to statements of the week, as if that wasn't statement enough. So mine is a little bit different. It's off of the beaten path, so to speak. It's a statement about media and sports media in
Oh boy, here
particular.
we go.
With NBC Sports Chicago closing down, some of Chicago's teams are going back to the future with their product. And by that, I mean appearing on locally broadcasted television waves. You don't need any cable packaging. You don't need any streaming. Just a pair of rabbit ears, $10, not per month, not on a subscription basis. You go to a Walmart, a Best Buy, you go online, anywhere from like between $10, $15. You can get a pair of rabbit ears. You plug it into your TV. You get all the channels lined up and you'll be able to watch the Chicago Bulls, the Chicago Blackhawks, and the Chicago White Sox starting, I believe it's October 1st. These teams are going to be appearing all of their games on broadcast television, something that hasn't happened for, I want to say, decade plus at this point. There used to be a point in time where you could go to the sports section of your newspaper and see when your teams are playing on WGN or WCIU or Fox 32. Talking about the local TV channels, if they're going to be on ABC7. Of course, with the NFL, if you have a pair of rabbit ears, if you either just never got into cable or a cord cutter, what have you, you at the very least get the CBS and the Fox national game. You got to do a little extra uh, purchasing if you want to be able to have a full access to all the games that aren't on primetime or broadcast TV. But this is a wonderful way to grow a fan base. I mean, some great memories are just of being able to turn on a TV and watch, whether it was the White Sox, the Bulls, the Blackhawks. If you're a Cubs fan, turning on WGN, the Superstation, being able to catch a Cubs game, that's something that has gone away for a good amount of people, I think, because not everybody can or want to afford or pay out for a special cable package or a streaming service. For somebody like me, I don't pay for any of that stuff.
I
I
do.
don't utilize it enough. It's not as big. It's not as important to me, I guess, is the way I would get around to saying that. But how do you build a fan base? How do you get somebody into sports? I mean, let's just like take back to my childhood, for example, before all internet streaming and everything. It was you had rabbit ears, you had regular TV, you had dish, you had cable. I had neither of those last two options. Yet with these teams being on free TV, that was a foundational experience, a foundational component in me becoming a sports fan in general, and bringing me to a point where I wanted to do a radio show at a college station that I'm doing this show with you now, Kamen. This is bigger than just dollars and cents. This is about growing a fan base and offering options to people who, like I said, might not have any sort of other alternative. You are growing the opportunity to bring in, to expand the tent, bring more people to the table to watch your teams, to watch your product, to get into the game. Um, Bulls and White Sox, I believe, are going to be Chicago only. But even if you're all the way up in Milwaukee, for example, if you're in Wisconsin, you can get Chicago Blackhawks. on your TV as well, because there is no Minnesota, Wisconsin competitor for that market. So even the Chicago Blackhawks get to grow their fan base a little bit with some of our neighbors to the north. So I think this is a great move for these teams in terms of going from one model of television to another for whatever reason. I'm not into the whole business behind what's better for them price wise. I just know that as a consumer, I think this is a really, really nice move, and I wanted to applaud and commend these teams for doing this.
Awesome. I mean, I can't disagree with that. I am one of
Oh,
those
I should
guys
throw
that,
out the channels really quickly.
yes, hit me.
62.2, 62.3 on TV. That switch makes they flip the switch October 1st, I believe it is. So that's how you
Okay.
can go and watch.
Yeah, I'm one of the rare guys that still pays for cable.
Mhm.
I like my sports channels too much. So give me the cable, Tom. I'll shell out the money because you know what? I use it. I do
Yeah.
use it, and it's worth it for me. My statement of the week, if you watched earlier in the show, I kind of alluded to it in some ways. But I think it's time to end the debate. Who is the second best quarterback in the league? Mahomes, we have established, is clear cut number one. I think we're at the stage where the clear cut number two quarterback is Josh Allen. He doesn't have an MVP, which is ridiculous. How
No.
Lamar has two and Josh doesn't have any, but no Stephon Diggs, no Gabe Davis. 3 games in, not a single receiver with 15 catches or more. He's become a better quarterback without Diggs. He's spreading the ball out a lot more, and he's limiting the turnovers, Tom. He's got 7 touchdown passes. I'm looking at the numbers. 2 rushing touchdowns, 9 total touchdowns, no picks, and no lost fumbles, no turnovers for Josh Allen. Taking that next step in his career. And the Bills are 3-0. He's looked like the MVP. I think he wins the MVP this season. And I think it's the Peyton Manning and Tom Brady like atmosphere, Mahomes and Allen. He's the number 2 guy. Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, get out of here. Josh Allen is the clear cut number 2 quarterback. He does things that, quite frankly, really nobody can do. I mean, I think Mahomes is overall better because he's clutch and he's a little bit better passer, has a little bit more of the off angle throws. But the combo of the ability to air the ball a million miles away and also run past you and run you over, just the sheer talent Josh Allen possesses is unbelievable. I mean, this guy is different. I think that Sunday Night Football stage, we look at one game way too much. But I think it's a game where he's going head to head against Lamar Jackson. A lot of fans who watch a lot of highlights, who see who the MVP is, who watch Red Zone, who play fantasy football, who bet, who might not watch the full game during the 12 and 3 p.m. window, myself included. I'm a Red Zone lover. I love
Mhm.
watching Red Zone. Sunday Night Football, Tom, is the time where you sit down and you watch the entire football game. You watch every snap, you watch every play. I think the entire country is going to notice that Josh Allen, not Lamar Jackson, is the second best quarterback in the National Football League. Give it up for Josh Allen. That's my boy.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a strong start to the season, no argument to this point. I know we talk about like in general, like who some like the categories. I think this year in particular, Josh Allen's number one as far as
So
his
far,
performance has been going. So
so
yeah,
far, number one so far.
it's a growing sample size. Interesting to see how he goes this week, and
But
interesting to see how all these games go.
you even look at Lamar and Joe Burrow, though, the last
Hmm.
couple of years, they've missed time with injuries. Aaron
Sure.
Rodgers has faded. I mean, look at the last 5 years as a whole. You would say for the last 5 years, Josh Allen is a pretty solid number 2 consistently year
Hmm.
in, year out. But that'll do it for us for this program. Fantastic show, Tom. Glad to be back and doing it. Hoping for a show next week. Most likely planning on a show next week where we'll recap some of these games, talk about the next round of games. A lot of fun stuff. I am super pumped to have the NFL back. The season has been so good so far. So many close games and so many unpredictable games, man. So
Hmm.
many upsets. This is what makes the National Football League probably the best sports league in the world. It's once a week. I mean, come on. You cannot beat the drama of the NFL. So that'll do it for us for tonight. Thank you, Tom, for a great show. Thank you to all the listeners that tune into the show. You guys are the best. We'll see you guys soon. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon.